When my husband of 38 years died and left half his fortune to his mistress, I smiled at the funeral like a good widow should. 6 months later, when that same mistress told me I was no longer part of this family at my only son's wedding, something inside me finally snapped. 3 days after that, I watched from my kitchen window as she was escorted from her luxury condo by security guards. That's when I realized that revenge isn't a meal best served cold. It's best served with a side of financial ruin. If you're watching this, subscribe now and tell me in the comments if you've ever wanted to get even with someone who did you wrong. Because trust me, what happens next makes Revenge of the Nerds look like a kindergarten playground spat. I suppose I should start at the beginning, though there's nothing pretty about it. My name is Eleanor Mitchell. Ellie to my friends, though I don't have many of those left. Not since Richard, my late husband, decided that a 58-year-old woman who'd given him 3 decades of her life, raised a son, and helped build his business, was somehow not enough anymore. I met Richard when I was 25, working as a receptionist at the accounting firm where he'd just made junior partner. He was 32, ambitious, and had that kind of smile that made you feel like you were the only person in the room. We married 11 months later. By then, I was already pregnant with our son, Michael. For almost 30 years, I thought we had a good marriage. Not perfect, whose is, but solid. I hosted the dinner parties that helped him climb the corporate ladder. I sat through countless boring golf tournaments with the wives of his clients. I redecorated our house 6 times to match his rising status. And I raised our boy mostly on my own, since Richard was always closing one more deal or entertaining one more client. What a fool I was. The affair started when I was 55. Her name was Vanessa Carlisle, and she was 36 when they met. Younger than me, of course, but not so young that people would talk too much. She was a client relations manager at a luxury hotel chain where Richard's firm did the accounting. Pretty in that manufactured way, blonde hair always perfectly highlighted, nails always freshly manicured, clothes always designer labels. I didn't know about her for nearly 3 years. 3 years. Can you imagine the dinner parties she probably attended where I poured her wine? The Christmas cards from the company with her standing 2 people away from my husband, both of them pretending they weren't sleeping together? I found out the way wives always do, by accident. Richard's cell phone buzzed one night while he was in the shower. A text message from V popped up on the screen. Last night was amazing. Can't wait to feel you inside me again tomorrow. Just like that, my world collapsed. When I confronted him, Richard didn't even have the decency to deny it. You wouldn't understand, Ellie, he said, like I was some child. Vanessa makes me feel alive again. As if I was dead. As if the woman who'd built a life with him for 30 years was somehow the reason he needed to find excitement elsewhere. I should have left him then. Any self-respecting woman would have. But after 3 decades of being Mrs. Richard Mitchell, I didn't know who Ellie was anymore. And then there was the money. Richard had made millions through his firm, and our prenuptial agreement, the one I'd signed at 25, starry-eyed and naive, left me with almost nothing if I initiated a divorce. So I stayed, telling myself it was just a midlife crisis, that he'd come to his senses, that 30 years of marriage had to count for something. What a joke that turned out to be. 8 months after I discovered the affair, Richard complained of chest pains during a business dinner. By the time the ambulance arrived, he was gone. Massive heart attack, they said. Dead at 65. At the funeral, Vanessa had the nerve to show up wearing a black designer dress that cost more than my car. She stood at the back of the church, dabbing at dry eyes with a lace handkerchief, playing the role of the grieving. What? She wasn't his wife. She was barely even his girlfriend. She was the woman who helped him betray everything we'd built. But I kept my composure. I sat in the front row with Michael, accepted condolences, and pretended I didn't see her there. I was determined to maintain my dignity, if nothing else. Then came the reading of the will. Richard had changed it. Without telling me, without even hinting at it, he'd rewritten his will 6 months before his death. He left me our house, how generous, and half his estate. The other half, nearly $12 million, went to Vanessa. He wanted to make sure you were both taken care of, the lawyer explained, as if that made it better. Michael was furious. "This is ridiculous," he shouted. "That woman has no right to our family's money." But legally, there was nothing we could do. Richard had been of sound mind when he made the changes. The documents were all properly signed and witnessed. Vanessa would get her millions. I went home that day and did something I hadn't done since the funeral. I cried. Not delicate tears, but ugly, heaving sobs that left me gasping for breath. I cried for the years I'd wasted, for the humiliation, for the fact that even in death, Richard had found a way to betray me one last time. When the tears finally stopped, something else took their place. A cold, hard resolve. Richard might have left Vanessa his money, but he'd also left me with something else. Knowledge. 38 years of watching him build his business, manage his finances, and yes, occasionally bend the rules. I picked up the phone and called the one person who might be able to help me make sense of it all. Martin Greaves, Richard's former business partner, who'd retired 5 years earlier after a falling out. "I need to understand exactly what Richard left behind," I told him. "All of it, Martin. Even the parts he didn't want anyone to see." Martin was silent for a long moment. Then he sighed. "Come by my house tomorrow, Ellie. We have a lot to talk about." Martin's house was nothing like ours. Where Richard had insisted on a sprawling colonial in the most exclusive neighborhood, Martin and his wife lived in a modest ranch-style home with a vegetable garden out back. No pretenses, no showing off. Just a comfortable place to live. When I arrived, Martin's wife Sandy gave me a warm hug and then tactfully disappeared to run some errands, leaving us alone at their kitchen table. "You look like hell, Ellie," Martin said, pushing a cup of coffee toward me. "Thank you for noticing," I replied. "It's been a challenging few months." Martin nodded, his gray eyebrows pulling together. "I was sorry to hear about the will. That wasn't right, what Rich did." "No, it wasn't," I agreed. "But I'm not here for sympathy, Martin. I'm here because you and Richard worked together for 20 years. You know where all the bodies are buried." A flicker of something, alarm, maybe, crossed Martin's face. "That's not the best choice of words, isn't it?" I took a sip of coffee. "Richard left half his estate to his mistress. I want to know if there's more I don't know about." Martin leaned back in his chair, studying me. "What exactly are you asking, Ellie?" "I'm asking if my husband was hiding money. I'm asking if there are accounts or investments I don't know about. I'm asking," I leaned forward, "if Vanessa Carlyle is entitled to every penny she thinks she is." Martin's eyes dropped to the table. "You know Richard and I had a falling out before I retired. You never said why." "No, I didn't." He sighed deeply. "The firm was doing well, very well. But Rich wanted more. He started taking on clients I wasn't comfortable with. People with cash businesses who needed creative accounting solutions, if you catch my drift." I felt a chill. "Are you saying Richard was laundering money?" "Not exactly. More like helping certain clients minimize their tax burdens through aggressive offshore strategies. Nothing technically illegal, but definitely in the gray area." Martin rubbed his face. "When I objected, Rich bought me out. Paid a fair price, but made it clear my services were no longer required." "And after you left?" "From what I hear, he went further down that road. Started a separate division of the firm that handled special clients. Very high net worth, very private." I sat back processing this. "So there could be money hidden away?" "Almost certainly," Martin nodded. Rich was a master at creating complex financial structures. Shells within shells. He could move money around like a magician. And these structures, they'd still be in place after his death? Unless someone dismantled them, yes. Martin eyed me carefully. "What are you thinking, Ellie?" "I'm thinking that I was married to Richard for 38 years. That under the law, half of everything he earned during our marriage belongs to me, even the parts he tried to hide." I met Martin's gaze steadily. "And I'm thinking that Vanessa Carlyle has no legal claim to any money Richard hid." Martin was quiet for a moment. Then he reached for a notepad and pen. "I'm going to give you some names. People who might be able to help you look into this. But Ellie," he looked up at me, "be careful. Some of Richard's clients won't appreciate anyone digging into their financial arrangements." I'm not afraid, I said. Maybe you should be, Martin replied. The first name on Martin's list was Catherine Zhao, a forensic accountant who specialized in uncovering hidden assets in divorce cases. Her office was in a sleek downtown building, all glass and steel, a far cry from Martin's homey kitchen. Mrs. Mitchell, Catherine greeted me, extending a perfectly manicured hand. She was perhaps 40, with sharp eyes and a sharper suit. I was sorry to hear about your husband. Thank you, I said, taking the seat she offered across from her desk. Though I suspect you've heard about more than just his death. A small smile touched her lips. Martin filled me in on the basics. You believe your late husband may have hidden assets that weren't included in his estate, and you want to find them. That's right. May I ask why? From what Martin said, you still inherited a considerable sum. I straightened in my chair. Half of what should have been mine went to the woman my husband was sleeping with. I want to know if there's more out there that she might try to claim. Catherine nodded. I understand. But I should warn you, this kind of investigation isn't cheap. My retainer starts at $20,000, and depending on how complex your husband's finances were, the final bill could be much higher. I can afford it, I said, reaching into my purse for my checkbook. When can you start? Over the next 2 months, Catherine earned every penny of her exorbitant fee. She dug through Richard's financial records like an archaeologist, carefully brushing away layers of deception to reveal what lay beneath. What she found confirmed Martin's suspicions. Richard had indeed created a web of offshore accounts, shell companies, and nominee directors. Millions of dollars had been moved through this network, eventually landing in investment accounts in places like the Cayman Islands, Switzerland, and Singapore. The good news, Catherine told me during one of our weekly meetings, is that none of this money was included in the estate that was divided between you and Ms. Carlyle. The bad news is that accessing it won't be simple. Explain, I said. Your husband set up these structures to be opaque. Each layer requires different documentation to penetrate. Some require signatures from the nominal directors, people paid to lend their names to these companies. Others require special codes or passwords. Do we know what those are? Catherine shook her head. Not yet, but I've identified something interesting. She slid a document across the desk to me. Most of these hidden funds were moved after your husband began his relationship with Miss Carlyle. I studied the paper, tracing the flow of money with my finger. He was hiding it from me? Possibly, Catherine agreed. Or he was preparing to leave you. The thought hit me like a physical blow. After all those years, Richard had been planning to leave me for Vanessa. The only thing that had stopped him was his heart attack. There's something else, Catherine continued, oblivious to my distress. Several properties purchased through these shell companies are currently occupied. One is a penthouse apartment in the Westbrook Tower downtown. I looked up sharply. That's where Vanessa lives. Catherine's eyes widened slightly. Interesting. According to the records, that property was purchased 3 years ago for $4.2 million by a company called Blue Horizon LLC. Blue Horizon is owned by another company in Delaware, which is in turn owned by a trust in the Cayman Islands. Richard bought her an apartment, I said flatly. It appears so. And there's more. A beach house in Malibu. A ski chalet in Aspen. All purchased through similar structures. All within the last 3 years. I felt sick. While I'd been at home, maintaining our life, Richard had been setting up a parallel existence with Vanessa, complete with luxury properties around the country. Can we prove Richard was behind these purchases? I asked. With the right documentation, yes. And if we can, then legally. These properties are marital assets that should have been included in his estate. I sat back, my mind racing. What about the accounts themselves? The money in offshore banks? That's trickier, Catherine admitted. Without passwords or access codes, those funds are effectively locked away. But they belong to me, I insisted. At least half of them do. In theory, yes. In practice. Catherine spread her hands. We'd need more information. I thought about that for a moment. Then something occurred to me. What about Vanessa? Could she access these accounts? Catherine considered this. If your husband shared the information with her, passwords, account numbers, that sort of thing, then yes, she could. And is there any way to tell if she has been accessing them? We could monitor the accounts we know about, see if there's any activity. Catherine gave me an appraising look. You think she's using these hidden funds? I think, I said slowly, that Vanessa Carlyle is living a lifestyle that even $12 million wouldn't support indefinitely. The clothes, the cars, the vacations she's constantly posting about on social media. She's spending money like it's water. Let me see what I can find out, Catherine promised. A week later, Catherine called me with news. You are right, she said without preamble. There's been activity in several of the accounts we identified. Money moving between them and then substantial withdrawals. Vanessa, I said. It wasn't a question. Most likely. And there's more. Remember those properties I mentioned? They're all titled to the same network of companies, but the utility bills, property taxes, everything is being paid from one of these offshore accounts. An account that's seen regular transfers into Ms. Carlyle's personal bank account. I gripped the phone tighter. So she knows about the hidden money. Not only knows about it, she's actively using it. How much are we talking about, Catherine? In total, how much did Richard hide? There was a pause. Based on what we've uncovered so far, just over $23 million. I nearly dropped the phone. $23 million, on top of the $24 million that had been divided between Vanessa and me. Richard had hidden half his fortune. Mrs. Mitchell, are you still there? Yes, I managed. What do we do now? That depends on what you want. We can continue tracking the money, building evidence. Eventually, we could file a petition with the court to have these assets recognized as part of the estate and distributed accordingly. How long would that take? Legal proceedings like this? A year, maybe more. A year of watching Vanessa spend money that should have been mine. A year of her living in properties that Richard had bought with our marital assets. Is there a faster option? I asked. Catherine was quiet for a moment. There might be. It's not something I'd normally suggest, but given the circumstances, we could freeze the accounts. How? With the information we have, I could approach the banks directly. Inform them that these accounts are the subject of a legal dispute involving a deceased account holder. Most financial institutions are extremely cautious about such matters. They don't want to be accused of improperly dispersing disputed funds. They'd likely freeze the accounts pending legal resolution. And the properties? Same principle. We notify the management companies, tax authorities, and utility providers that the ownership is under dispute. It won't prevent her from living there, but it could complicate her ability to sell or borrow against them. I thought about it. Freezing the accounts wouldn't get me the money right away, but it would stop Vanessa from spending it. And more importantly, it would send her a message. I knew what she had, and I was coming for it. Do it, I said. I didn't have to wait long to see results. 3 days after Catherine initiated the account freezes, my phone rang. It was Michael. Mom, he said, sounding confused. Do you know why Vanessa just called me in a complete panic? Something about her bank cards being declined and her accounts being frozen. I smiled to myself. I might have an idea. Mom. Michael's voice took on a warning tone. What did you do? Nothing illegal, sweetheart. Just making sure what's mine stays mine. She's threatening to call her lawyer. She seems to think you're behind this. Smart woman, I said. Smarter than I gave her credit for. Mom, seriously. I know you hate her. God knows I'm not her biggest fan either, but is this really a good idea? She got her inheritance fair and square. I bristled at that. Fair? There was nothing fair about what your father did, Michael. Nothing fair about him giving half of everything to a woman he'd known for 3 years, while the wife who stood by him for 38 got the other half. I know, Mom. I'm just saying. And that's not even counting what he hid. I continued, unable to stop now that I'd started. Did you know your father had another $23 million squirreled away in offshore accounts? Money that he never declared. That wasn't in his will? Money that Vanessa has been happily spending since he died. There was a long silence on the other end. 23 million? Michael finally said. At least. Maybe more we haven't found yet. And she knew about it? Vanessa? She's been drawing from those accounts for months, paying for her fabulous lifestyle with money that legally should be part of your father's estate. Money that should be divided between us. Another silence. I had no idea. Neither did I until I started digging. Your father was very good at keeping secrets, it seems. What are you going to do now? Get what's rightfully mine, I said simply. And if Vanessa doesn't like it, she's welcome to explain to a judge why she's been spending money from accounts that don't officially exist. After I hung up, I sat in my kitchen, looking out at the garden Richard had never cared about, the one place in our house that had been truly mine. For the first time in months, I felt a flicker of satisfaction. It wasn't justice, not yet. But it was a start. I should have known Vanessa wouldn't take this lying down. 2 days after the accounts were frozen, she showed up at my door. I was in the garden, deadheading roses, when I heard the crunch of tires on the driveway. Looking up, I saw a sleek red convertible, this year's model, of course, pull up to the house. Vanessa emerged, wearing oversized sunglasses and a white pantsuit that probably cost more than most people's monthly mortgage. I didn't move, just watched as she marched up to the front door and jabbed at the doorbell repeatedly. When no one answered, she turned and scanned the property, finally spotting me among the rose bushes. She stalked across the lawn, her stiletto heels sinking into the soft grass with each step. I almost smiled at the sight. "What the hell did you do?" she demanded when she reached me, not bothering with pleasantries. I snipped another dead rose head and dropped it into my basket. "I'm afraid you'll have to be more specific, Vanessa. Don't play dumb. My accounts are frozen. All of them. I couldn't even pay for coffee this morning." "How tragic for you," I murmured, moving to the next bush. She grabbed my arm, forcing me to look at her. "Fix this. Now." I glanced pointedly at her hand until she released me. "I'm afraid I can't do that. Those accounts are part of an ongoing legal investigation." "What investigation?" "The estate was settled months ago." "The estate that we knew about, yes. But it seems Richard wasn't entirely forthcoming about his finances. Quite a lot of money was, shall we say, off the books." Vanessa's face paled slightly behind her sunglasses. "I don't know what you're talking about." "No." I raised an eyebrow. Blue Horizon LLC doesn't ring a bell? Or the Cayman Islands account ending in 4386? The one you've withdrawn over $300,000 from in the last 2 months. Her mouth opened, then closed. For once, the perfectly poised Vanessa Carlyle seemed at a loss for words. "Here's what's going to happen," I continued, returning to my roses. "All those accounts, all those properties, the penthouse, the beach house, the chalet, they're going to be properly added to Richard's estate. And then they're going to be divided according to the law." "Richard left those to me," she hissed. "They were gifts. He wanted me to have them." "Richard didn't own them, at least not officially. They were purchased with marital assets through shell companies, which means they belong to his estate, and half of his estate belongs to me." I smiled thinly. "But feel free to explain to the IRS why you've been accessing undeclared offshore accounts. I'm sure they'd be fascinated." Vanessa ripped off her sunglasses, her eyes blazing. "You vindictive old bitch. You think you've won? This is just the beginning." "No, Vanessa," I corrected her gently. "This is just me evening the playing field. You want to see vindictive? Keep pushing." She leaned in close, her voice dropping to a menacing whisper. "You have no idea who you're dealing with. Richard told me everything about you. Every weakness, every fear. He said you were pathetic, clinging to a marriage that was dead years ago." The words stung, but I kept my face impassive. Yet here I am, still standing. And there you are, unable to buy a cup of coffee. She straightened, smoothing her white pantsuit. "Enjoy this moment, Ellie. It won't last. By the time I'm done with you, you'll wish you'd never started this war." "Is that a threat?" "It's a promise." She turned and walked back toward her car, her heels leaving little divots in my perfect lawn. I watched her go, a strange mixture of triumph and unease swirling in my stomach. I'd rattled Vanessa Carlyle, yes. But I'd also made an enemy, one who clearly had nothing to lose. That night, I couldn't sleep. Vanessa's words kept echoing in my mind. Richard told me everything about you. Every weakness, every fear. What had he told her? What secrets had he shared with his mistress, while lying next to her in beds I'd never see? The thought made my skin crawl. At 2 in the morning, I gave up on sleep and went downstairs to make a cup of tea. As the kettle boiled, I gazed out the kitchen window at the darkened garden. The security lights cast long shadows across the lawn, making familiar shapes seem suddenly ominous. A movement caught my eye, a flicker of something by the garden shed. I squinted, trying to make out what it was. Probably just a cat, I told myself. Or the wind moving a branch. But then I saw it again. A shadow, distinctly human, slipping between the trees at the edge of the property. My heart began to pound. I reached for my phone, ready to call 911, when the security lights suddenly went out, plunging the garden into darkness. Not a coincidence. Someone had disabled them. With shaking hands, I dialed Michael's number. He answered on the 4th ring, his voice thick with sleep. "Mom? What's wrong?" "There's someone in the garden," I whispered, moving away from the window. The security lights just went out.
"What?
"Are you sure?"
He sounded more awake now, alarmed.
"Yes, I saw them. A person moving by the trees." "Call the police," he said immediately. "I'm on my way over."
"Don't go outside, Mom."
"Stay inside with the doors locked." I hung up and dialed 911, reporting a possible intruder. The dispatcher assured me officers would be there within minutes and advised me to find a secure room to wait in. I retreated to Richard's study, the one room in the house with a door that locked from the inside. As I turned the key, I heard a sound that made my blood freeze, the soft scrape of metal against metal coming from the back door. Someone was trying to get in. I pressed myself against the study wall, away from the windows, clutching my phone like a lifeline. The house was too quiet, every small creak and groan magnified in the stillness. Then came a sound I couldn't mistake, the distinct crack of breaking glass, followed by the thud of the back door swinging open against the wall. They were inside. I covered my mouth to stifle a gasp, trying to control my breathing. Footsteps moved through the kitchen, slow and deliberate. Not the cautious steps of a common burglar, but someone who knew the layout of the house. Someone looking for something or someone. The footsteps paused, then began moving toward the front of the house, away from the study. I heard drawers being opened in the living room, papers rustling. What were they looking for? Minutes stretched like hours as I huddled in the dark, listening to the intruder move through my home. Finally, blessedly, I heard sirens in the distance, growing louder as they approached. The footsteps in the house suddenly quickened, moving back toward the kitchen. The back door slammed, and then silence fell. By the time the police arrived, sweeping through the house with flashlights and drawn weapons, the intruder was gone. But they'd left their mark. The living room had been searched, desk drawers emptied onto the floor, Richard's filing cabinet rifled through. "Looks like they were after something specific," the officer said, surveying the mess. "Any idea what?" I shook my head, still trembling with residual fear.
"No."
But that wasn't entirely true. An idea was forming in my mind, a suspicion about what, or who, might have motivated this break-in. "Ma'am, is anything missing? Jewelry, electronics, cash?" I looked around the room, trying to spot what wasn't there. My eyes fell on Richard's desk, now cleared of the papers that had been stacked there. "Files," I said. "My husband's financial documents. They were in his desk." The officer made a note. "Any idea what was in those files?" "Something valuable." "Information," I said softly. "About offshore accounts, shell companies, hidden assets." He looked up sharply. "The kind of information someone might not want discovered?" "Exactly that kind." When Michael arrived 20 minutes later, wild-eyed and disheveled, the police were still taking photographs and dusting for fingerprints. He rushed to embrace me, checking me over as if to reassure himself I was unharmed. "What happened? Did they take anything?" "Financial documents," I told him. "All the information I had about your father's hidden accounts." His face darkened. "Vanessa." "We don't know that," I cautioned. though I suspected the same. Who else would it be? You threaten her money. She threatens you right back. He ran a hand through his hair. Mom, this is getting dangerous. Maybe you should let it go. Let it go. I stared at him in disbelief. Michael, she just broke into my home. She's been stealing money that rightfully belongs to us. And you want me to let it go? I want you to be safe, he insisted. Money isn't worth your life. This isn't just about money, I said fiercely. It's about justice. It's about not letting her take everything from me, not my dignity, not my security, and certainly not my son. Michael's expression softened. No one's taking me anywhere, Mom. Aren't they? I asked quietly. You invited her to your wedding, Michael. You seated her in the front row, like she was family. He looked away, uncomfortable. That was different. Dad had just died. I don't know what I thought. She told me I wasn't part of the family anymore, I reminded him. Right there at your wedding. And you said nothing. Michael winced. I didn't hear her say that. If I had. But you didn't. I cut him off. And now she thinks she can threaten me, break into my home, and get away with it. I straightened my shoulders. Well, she's wrong. After the police left, promising to patrol the neighborhood throughout the night, Michael insisted on staying over. He settled into his old bedroom while I retreated to mine, though I knew sleep would not come easily. As I lay in the darkness, staring at the ceiling, I realized something important. Vanessa's break-in had been a mistake. She might have taken the physical documents, but Catherine had copies of everything. And now, Vanessa had escalated this from a financial dispute to something much more serious. She had made it personal, and that was going to cost her dearly. In the morning, I would call Catherine with new instructions. It was time to stop playing defense and start playing offense. If Vanessa Carlyle wanted a war, I would give her one. But unlike my husband, I wouldn't underestimate my opponent. And unlike Vanessa, I had nothing left to lose. The morning after the break-in, I sat at my kitchen table clutching a cup of coffee that had long gone cold. The police had come and gone, leaving behind incident reports and hollow reassurances about increased patrols in the neighborhood. Michael had finally gone home to his wife after I'd practically pushed him out the door. I needed to be alone. I needed to think. My hand trembled slightly as I reached for my phone and dialed Catherine's number. Mrs. Mitchell, she answered on the second ring, her voice crisp and professional as always. I was just about to call you. We've had some interesting developments with. Someone broke into my house last night. I interrupted. A beat of silence. Are you all right?
Physically, yes.
But they took all the documents about Richard's hidden accounts. Every file. Every paper trail. I see. Catherine's tone shifted from professional to concerned. Do you think it was Miss Carlyle? Who else would it be? I ran a hand through my hair, still unwashed from the night before. She came to see me yesterday, threatened me, said I'd regret starting this war. Did you report this to the police? Of course. But what are they going to do? They can't prove it was her. Catherine was quiet for a moment, and I could almost hear her mind working. Mrs. Mitchell, this changes things. Breaking and entering, theft of documents, potential threats to your safety, these are criminal matters. I'm aware, I said dryly. What I mean is, we may need to adjust our strategy. I've been treating this as a straightforward financial dispute, but if Miss Carlyle is willing to resort to criminal activities, we need to be more cautious. I gripped the phone tighter. I'm not backing down, Catherine. I'm not suggesting you should. But perhaps we need additional support. She paused. Do you know any good lawyers who specialize in criminal matters? I thought about it. Not personally. Richard handled all the legal contacts. I may know someone who can help. His name is Daniel Harmon. He's a former prosecutor who now works in private practice. He handles delicate matters. Like what? Like situations where financial disputes intersect with potential criminal activity. Catherine's voice lowered slightly. He's discreet, effective, and not afraid to play hardball when necessary. Sounds perfect, I said. Can you arrange a meeting? I'll call him today. In the meantime, Mrs. Mitchell, you might want to consider upgrading your home security. And perhaps staying somewhere else for a few days? I looked around my kitchen, the kitchen where I'd prepared thousands of meals, where I'd watched my son grow up, where I'd built a life with a man who, it turned out, I barely knew. No, I said firmly. I'm not leaving my home. If Vanessa Carlyle thinks she can scare me away, she's very much mistaken. As you wish, Catherine replied, sounding unconvinced. But please be careful. This situation is escalating faster than I anticipated. After hanging up, I sat for a long moment, staring at nothing. Then I stood, walked to the sink, and dumped out my cold coffee. It was time to stop reacting and start acting. First, I called a security company and arranged for a complete overhaul of my home system, cameras, motion sensors, the works. Next, I called a locksmith to change every lock in the house. Then I called Michael. Mom, he answered immediately, concern evident in his voice. Is everything okay? Everything's fine, I assured him. But I need a favor. Do you still have that old laptop your father gave you a few years ago? The one he used before he upgraded. I think so. It's probably in the storage closet. Why? I need to borrow it. Sure, but what for? I hesitated, wondering how much to tell him. Your father may have kept records on it. Something that could help me understand what's really going on with his finances. Michael was quiet for a moment. Mom, are you sure you want to keep digging into this? After what happened last night, especially after what happened last night, I cut him off. Whoever broke and was looking for something specific, Michael. Something they didn't want me to find. All the more reason to let it go, he argued. If they're willing to break into your house. I'm not giving up, I said firmly. But I promise I'll be careful. So, the laptop? He sighed, the sound of a son who knew arguing with his mother was pointless. I'll drop it by this afternoon. Daniel Harmon didn't look like any lawyer I'd ever met. Where Richard's colleagues had been polished men in expensive suits with carefully cultivated appearances, Daniel was rough around the edges. His suit was good quality but rumpled, his tie slightly askew, his dark hair just a touch too long to be considered conventional. Mrs. Mitchell, he greeted me, extending a hand across Catherine's sleek office desk. His handshake was firm, direct. Catherine's filled me in on the basics of your situation. Call me Ellie, I said, taking the seat he offered. Ellie, he nodded. I understand you've had a break-in.
Yes.
The night before last. And you believe it was your late husband's companion? I appreciated his delicate choice of words. I do. Any proof? Nothing concrete. She threatened me earlier that day, but it was just the two of us. No witnesses. Daniel nodded, making a note in a small black notebook. Tell me about these offshore accounts you've discovered. For the next hour, I walked him through everything Catherine had uncovered. The shell companies, the hidden properties, the millions Richard had squirreled away. Daniel listened intently, occasionally interrupting to ask a clarifying question, but mostly just absorbing the information. And Ms. Carlyle has been accessing these accounts, he asked when I finished.
Yes.
At least until we froze them. Which was when? 4 days ago. Daniel exchanged a glance with Catherine. Interesting timing. She threatens you. The accounts are frozen, and that same night someone breaks into your home looking for financial documents. It was her, I insisted. I believe you, he said, surprising me. The question is, what do you want to do about it? I want what's rightfully mine, and I want her to pay for what she's done. Daniel leaned back in his chair, studying me. There are different kinds of paying, Mrs. Mitchell. Legal remedies, financial penalties, and then there are other kinds. What exactly are you suggesting? He shrugged one shoulder. I'm not suggesting anything specific. I'm trying to understand your goals so I can advise you appropriately. I considered his question carefully. What did I want, really? The money. Yes, it was rightfully mine, after all. But there was something else, something that burned hotter than my desire for financial justice. I want her to lose everything, I said finally, the words emerging with a vehemence that surprised even me. The way I lost everything. My husband, my dignity, my sense of security. She took it all. I want her to know how that feels." Daniel didn't look shocked or disapproving. He simply nodded, as if I'd confirmed something he already suspected. "Then we need a comprehensive strategy. One that addresses both the legal aspects and the personal elements." He turned to Catherine. "The offshore accounts. Have you identified all of them?" "I believe so," Catherine replied. "Though without the documentation that was stolen, proving ownership might be challenging." "But not impossible," Daniel mused. "Especially if Ms. Carlyle has been accessing them. Every transaction leaves a trail." "There's something else," I said, remembering the laptop Michael had dropped off. "I have my husband's old computer. I haven't had a chance to look through it yet, but there might be information there." Daniel's eyes lit up. "That could be extremely valuable. Financial records, emails, passwords." "I don't know his password," I admitted. "Let me worry about that," Daniel said with a small smile. "I have associates who specialize in data recovery." By the time our meeting ended, we had the outlines of a plan. Daniel would handle the potential criminal aspects, filing reports about the break-in, documenting Vanessa's threats, and building a case that could be turned over to the authorities if necessary. Catherine would continue tracking the money, focusing now on gathering evidence that could stand up in court without the stolen documents. And I would focus on Richard's laptop, hoping it might contain the missing pieces of this increasingly complex puzzle. As I drove home, I felt a strange mix of emotions. Part of me was still terrified. The memory of footsteps moving through my darkened house wasn't something I could easily forget. But another part felt energized, almost exhilarated. For the first time since Richard's death, I had a purpose, a mission. Vanessa Carlyle had no idea what was coming for her. The security company finished installing my new system that evening, cameras covering every approach to the house, motion sensors on all doors and windows, and a panic button that would summon police at the touch of a finger. The technician walked me through operating everything, then handed me a small key fob. "This is the panic button," he explained. "Carry it with you at all times. If you feel threatened, just press it, and help will be on the way." I nodded, slipping the fob into my pocket. "And the cameras? They're recording now." "Yes, ma'am. Everything is backed up to the cloud automatically. If anyone so much as steps on your property, you'll know about it." After he left, I moved through the house, checking every door and window, activating the alarm system, and finally settling in Richard's study with his old laptop. I opened it, staring at the login screen. As expected, it required a password. What would Richard have used? Our anniversary? Too obvious. And besides, I suspected Richard wouldn't have used anything related to me for his password. Michael's birthday? Maybe, but not likely for a man who'd missed so many of those birthdays over the years. On a hunch, I typed Vanessa. Incorrect. Her birthday? I didn't know it. I tried a few more combinations: his own birthday, his mother's maiden name, the address of his first apartment, but nothing worked. After the fifth attempt, a warning appeared on screen. Too many failed attempts. Additional failures will lock this device. Sighing, I closed the laptop. I'd have to wait for Daniel's expert. My phone rang, startling me. Michael's name flashed on the screen. "Hi, honey," I answered, trying to sound more cheerful than I felt. "Mom." His voice was tense. "Have you checked your email today?" "No, why?" "You need to. Right now." Something in his tone sent a chill through me. I moved to my desktop computer and pulled up my email. There, at the top of my inbox, was a message with no subject line, sent from an address I didn't recognize. "I see it," I told Michael. "What is it?" "Just open it." With trepidation, I clicked on the email. It contained no message, just an attachment, a video file. I clicked to download it, then played it. The video was grainy, obviously taken from a distance with a zoom lens. It showed a bedroom. Not just any bedroom, but the master suite in the beach house Richard had purchased in Malibu. Through the large windows, I could see two people, Richard and Vanessa. They were arguing. Richard gesturing angrily, Vanessa's face twisted with rage. There was no sound, but I didn't need audio to understand the scene was volatile. Then, suddenly, Vanessa picked up what looked like a heavy crystal paperweight from the dresser and hurled it at Richard. He ducked, and the object shattered against the wall behind him. Richard lunged forward, grabbing Vanessa's wrists. She struggled, kicking at him, her face contorted in fury. Then, as quickly as it had escalated, the fight seemed to dissipate. Richard released her wrists, said something, and turned away. The video ended there, freezing on a final frame of Richard walking toward the bedroom door, his back to Vanessa.
Mom?
Are you still there? Michael's voice pulled me back to the present. Yes, I managed. My throat suddenly dry. Where did this come from? I don't know. I got the same email. So did Julia. Julia was Michael's wife. Do you think Vanessa sent it? Why would she? I asked, genuinely puzzled. This doesn't exactly paint her in a flattering light. Maybe it's a warning? Showing she's capable of violence. I replayed the video, studying it more carefully. The timestamp in the corner showed a date 3 weeks before Richard's death. This was taken from outside the house, I noted. Someone was watching them. Creepy, Michael agreed. But why send it to us now? I don't know. I stared at the frozen image of my husband, wondering what had been said in that room, what had sparked such rage. But I'm going to find out. I forwarded the video to Daniel immediately, calling him to make sure he received it. This is unexpected, he said after viewing it. Have you shown this to the police? Not yet. I wanted your advice first. Good instinct. This raises some interesting questions. Like who is filming my husband and his mistress without their knowledge?
Exactly.
And why send it to you now? I had been pondering the same question. Could it be connected to the break-in? Maybe whoever took the financial documents is trying to tell me something?
Possibly.
Or it could be someone else entirely who has their own agenda regarding Miss Carlyle. Daniel paused. This video shows her in a violent state. Combined with her threats to you and the break-in, it could be useful in establishing a pattern of behavior. You think we should go to the police? Not yet, he said after a moment's consideration. Let's wait and see if there's more. Whoever sent this may have additional information they're willing to share. After hanging up, I couldn't stop thinking about the video. The rage on Vanessa's face had been shocking, raw, uncontrolled fury that seemed at odds with her carefully cultivated image. What had driven her to such a state? And who had been watching, recording this private moment? My phone pinged with a text message from an unknown number. There's more where that came from. Interested. My heart raced. Was this the same person who'd sent the video? I showed the message to Michael, who'd insisted on coming over after our call. Don't respond, he said immediately. It could be a trap. Or it could be someone with information we need, I countered. Mom, think about it. Someone's been watching the beach house. Someone broke into your home. Now this mysterious message? It's too dangerous. He had a point, but my curiosity was overwhelming. What if this person knows something about your father's death? Michael's expression shifted. What are you suggesting? I don't know, I admitted. But the timing is strange, isn't it? This video was taken 3 weeks before your father died. They were fighting violently, and now someone wants me to know about it. You can't possibly think Vanessa had something to do with Dad's death, Michael said, but I could hear the doubt creeping into his voice. A healthy 65-year-old man suddenly drops dead of a heart attack. After we discover he's been hiding millions of dollars? After we see his mistress has a violent temper? I shook my head. I'm not saying she did anything, but I think we deserve to know the truth. Michael was quiet for a long moment. Then he nodded slowly. Respond to the text. But be careful what you say. I typed a simple reply. What do you have? The response came almost immediately. Meet me tomorrow. 3 p.m., the coffee shop on Maple Street. Come alone. I didn't go alone, of course. Daniel insisted on accompanying me, though he agreed to stay in the background, posing as a random customer while I met with our mysterious informant. The coffee shop was busy enough to provide anonymity, but quiet enough for conversation. I arrived early, selecting a table near the back with a clear view of the entrance. Daniel came in separately, settling at a table across the room with a newspaper and a cup of coffee. At precisely 3 o'clock, a man entered the shop. He was middle-aged, unremarkable in appearance, the kind of person you'd pass on the street without noticing. His eyes scanned the room, finally landing on me. With a slight nod, he approached my table. "Mrs. Mitchell?" he asked quietly.
Yes.
"And you are?" He sat down without answering. "Names aren't important. What matters is what I know." "About my husband and Vanessa Carlyle," I prompted. "Among other things." He placed a small USB drive on the table between us. "Everything I have is on this." I eyed the drive cautiously. "Why are you giving me this? What's your connection to my husband?" A flicker of something, anger? Regret? Crossed his face. "Let's just say your husband and I had business dealings that ended poorly. I've been keeping an eye on his activities ever since." "You were spying on him," I said flatly. "Monitoring," he corrected. "And it's a good thing I was. There are things on that drive you need to see." "Like what?" He leaned forward, lowering his voice. "More videos. Financial records. Communications between your husband and certain individuals he'd rather no one knew about." "Why give this to me now? Why not go to the police?" A thin smile crossed his face. "The police wouldn't be interested in most of it. But you would be, especially given your current situation with Ms. Carlyle." "What do you want in return?" I asked because there had to be something. "Nothing from you specifically. Let's just say I have my own reasons for wanting certain information to come to light." He stood, adjusting his jacket. "Watch the videos carefully, Mrs. Mitchell. Particularly the one from the night before your husband died." With that cryptic statement, he turned and walked out of the coffee shop, leaving me staring at the USB drive as if it might explode. Daniel was at my side within seconds. "What did he give you?" "More information," I said, pocketing the drive. "And possibly more questions than answers." Back at home, with Daniel and Catherine both present, I inserted the USB drive into my computer. It contained several folders, neatly labeled, financial records, communications, and surveillance. "Start with the financial records," Catherine suggested. "That's our immediate concern." The folder contained spreadsheets, PDFs of bank statements, and copies of wire transfers, all documenting the movement of money through Richard's network of shell companies. It was a goldmine of information, far more detailed than what had been stolen from my home. "This is incredible," Catherine murmured, scrolling through a particularly complex spreadsheet. "With this, we can trace every penny your husband moved offshore." "And prove Vanessa knew about it," Daniel added, pointing to a series of emails included in the communications folder. They showed exchanges between Richard and Vanessa discussing account numbers, transfer dates, and property purchases. But why would this man have all this? I wondered aloud. And why give it to me now? He mentioned business dealings with Richard that ended poorly, Daniel recalled. Could be a disgruntled associate, someone Richard crossed in a deal. Or someone with a personal vendetta, Catherine suggested. "Either way, his loss is our gain," Daniel said pragmatically. "This is exactly what we needed to build our case." But I was distracted, thinking about the man's parting words. He specifically mentioned a video from the night before Richard died. I opened the surveillance folder. It contained dozens of video files, each labeled with a date. I scrolled down to the one from the day before Richard's death and clicked play. The video showed Richard in his office downtown, not the main office of his firm, but a smaller, private space he kept in another building. I'd been there only a few times over the years. He was alone, pacing, clearly agitated. Then the door opened, and Vanessa entered. Unlike the previous video, this one had audio. "Did you do it?" Vanessa demanded without preamble. "Not yet," Richard replied, running a hand through his hair. "These things take time, Vanessa. I can't just change everything overnight without raising suspicions." "We had a deal, Richard. You promised me. And I'll keep that promise. But you need to be patient." Vanessa laughed, a harsh sound without humor. "Patient? I've been patient for 3 years while you strung me along with promises." "Just a little longer, Vanessa. After this deal, Vanessa. Once things settle down, Vanessa. I'm done waiting." "What exactly do you expect me to do?" Richard snapped. Divorce my wife of 38 years overnight? Transfer all my assets to you immediately? That's not how it works. No, that's not how it works for men like you, Vanessa shot back. You want the young girlfriend and the devoted wife. You want to keep your comfortable life while promising me the moon. That's not fair. Fair. Vanessa's voice rose. You know it's not fair? The fact that I've given you the best years of my life based on promises you never intended to keep. Of course I intended to keep them. I still do. The divorce papers are being prepared. The new will is drawn up. Everything is in motion. New will? I exchanged a startled look with Daniel. The will that had been read after Richard's death was dated just 6 months earlier. Had he been planning to change it again? On screen, Vanessa moved closer to Richard, her voice dropping to a menacing purr. If you're lying to me again, Richard, I swear to God, it will be the last time. Is that a threat? Richard asked, sounding more weary than alarmed. It's a promise. Either you take care of this, all of it, by the end of the week, or I'll take care of it myself. Meaning what exactly? Vanessa smiled, cold and hard. Meaning I have enough evidence of your financial irregularities to send you to prison for the rest of your miserable life. Think about that while you're deciding how much longer I should be patient. She turned and walked out, leaving Richard staring after her, his face a mask of frustration and fear. The video ended, and the three of us sat in stunned silence. Well, Daniel finally said, that certainly puts a different spin on things. She was blackmailing him, I whispered, threatening to expose his financial crimes if he didn't divorce me and change his will in her favor. And the very next day, he died of a heart attack, Catherine added, her implication clear. You can't possibly think she... Michael had entered the room quietly, catching the end of the video. It's certainly suspicious timing, Daniel said carefully. But a heart attack. Michael shook his head. How could she have caused that? None of us had an answer, but the question hung in the air, impossible to ignore. There's something else we need to consider, Daniel said after a moment. If Richard was planning to change his will again, to leave everything to Vanessa, then the current will, the one that split his estate between you, might not reflect his final wishes. Are you saying Vanessa could challenge it? I asked, alarmed. Potentially, if she could prove he was in the process of creating a new will when he died. But without the actual document, she'd need more than that video, Catherine pointed out. She'd need the draft will itself, or testimony from the lawyer who prepared it. I thought about the break-in, the documents that had been taken. What if that's what she was looking for when she broke into my house? Not just evidence of the offshore accounts, but proof that Richard was planning to change his will. It's possible, Daniel agreed. But if so, she didn't find it, or she would have filed a challenge by now. Unless she's still looking, I said softly. The four of us sat in silence, absorbing the implications of everything we'd just seen and heard. Richard had been planning to leave me with nothing. Vanessa had been blackmailing him. And the day after she threatened him, he died suddenly of a heart attack. It seemed impossible, yet the timing was too convenient to ignore. What do we do now? I finally asked. Daniel leaned forward, his expression grave. That depends on what you want, Mrs. Mitchell. We have enough evidence here to go to the police with concerns about your husband's death. We also have enough to build a solid case for reclaiming the offshore assets. Or what? Or we could approach Ms. Carlyle directly. With what we now know, we might be able to negotiate a settlement that's much more favorable to you. Blackmail her, you mean, Michael said, sounding uncomfortable. I prefer to call it leveraging our position, Daniel replied smoothly. I considered the options. Going to the police meant a long, public investigation, my private humiliation dragged into the open for everyone to see. A settlement might be quicker, cleaner, but it would mean letting Vanessa off the hook for whatever role she might have played in Richard's death. Neither option felt right. I need time to think, I said finally. Of course, Daniel nodded. But don't take too long. Now that we have this information, we should act on it before Ms. Carlyle realizes what we know. After they left, Michael stayed behind, his face troubled. Mom, Do you really think Vanessa could have had something to do with Dad's death? I don't know what to think anymore, I admitted. A week ago, I would have said it was impossible.
Now.
I gestured to the computer screen, where the frozen image of Richard and Vanessa's confrontation still displayed. Even if she did somehow cause his heart attack, Michael said, struggling with the words, how would we ever prove it? I don't know, I said again. But I intend to find out. That night, alone in my too-large house with its new security system humming reassuringly, I couldn't sleep. My mind kept replaying the videos we'd seen. Vanessa's rage, her threats, Richard's fear. How had I been so blind to what was happening right under my nose? At 2 a.m, I gave up on sleep and went downstairs to make tea. As the kettle boiled, I found myself drawn back to Richard's old laptop, still sitting on his desk where I'd left it. On impulse, I opened it and stared at the password prompt. What would Richard have used? Something so private, so personal that even his wife of 38 years wouldn't guess it. Then a thought struck me. What if it wasn't something personal to Richard, but something personal to Vanessa? I didn't know her birthday, but I did know when they met. I typed in the date, 07152021. Incorrect. I tried another approach. What was important to Vanessa? What did she value most? Money, certainly.
Power.
Status. I typed wealth and hit enter. To my shock, the screen unlocked, revealing Richard's desktop. I sat back, stunned. After all those years together, all I'd given him, all we'd built, and his password was wealth. Not my name, not our sons, not even Vanessa's. Just the cold, impersonal pursuit that had driven his entire life. It seemed fitting somehow. I began exploring the laptop's contents, opening folders, reading emails, examining financial spreadsheets. Most of it confirmed what we already knew. Richard had been hiding money, preparing to leave me, building a new life with Vanessa. Then I found something unexpected, a folder labeled simply insurance. Inside were scanned documents, not financial records or legal papers, but medical files. Richard's medical files, specifically from the 6 months before his death. They showed a series of appointments, tests, prescriptions. According to these records, Richard had been diagnosed with a serious heart condition 3 months before he died. His doctor had prescribed medication, recommended lifestyle changes, warned of the risks of stress and overexertion. Richard had known he was at risk for a heart attack. He'd been taking medication to prevent it. I dug deeper into the folder, finding pharmacy records showing regular refills of his prescription. Except, the last refill was 2 weeks before his death, enough for a 30-day supply. He shouldn't have run out. So, why had he suffered a fatal heart attack? I searched his email, looking for communications with his doctor, his pharmacy, anyone who might shed light on what happened. And there, buried in his deleted items folder, I found it an email exchange with Vanessa from the day before he died. Did you pick up my pills? Richard had written. Yes, Vanessa replied. I'll bring them tonight. But according to the police report from his death, no medication had been found in Richard's system. No pill bottles in his hotel room where he'd died. My blood ran cold as the implications sank in. Vanessa had Richard's heart medication the day before he died. Medication that, if not taken, would leave him vulnerable to exactly the kind of cardiac event that killed him. It wasn't proof, not the kind that would stand up in court. But it was enough to convince me that Vanessa Carlyle had done more than just steal my husband and try to take my money. She may have taken his life as well. With shaking hands, I downloaded everything from the laptop onto a flash drive, then shut it down. The sun was just beginning to rise, casting long shadows across Richard's study. In a few hours, I would call Daniel and show him what I'd found. We would go to the police, demand an investigation. But first, I needed to confront Vanessa myself. I needed to see her face when I told her what I knew. I picked up my phone and dialed her number, not the cell phone she used now, but the one she'd had when she was with Richard, the one listed in his contacts. To my surprise, she answered on the 3rd ring, her voice groggy with sleep. Hello. It's Eleanor Mitchell, I said, my voice steadier than I expected. We need to talk. In person. There was a long pause. It's 5:30 in the morning. I know what you did, I said simply. I know about Richard's heart medication. I know you had it the day before he died. Another pause, longer this time. When she spoke again, her voice had lost its sleepy quality, replaced by something harder, colder. You don't know anything. I have his laptop. I have the emails. I have everything, Vanessa. What do you want? She asked, cutting to the chase as she always did. Meet me at the beach house. The one in Malibu. Noon today. Why there? Because that's where it all happened, isn't it? That's where you planned it. She didn't deny it.
Fine. Noon.
Just you and me. No lawyers, no police. Agreed, I said, and hung up before she could add any more conditions. As I placed the phone down, I realized my hands were no longer shaking. For the first time since Richard's death, I felt something like clarity. Vanessa Carlyle had taken everything from me, my husband, my security, my dignity. Now it was my turn to take everything from her. The Malibu beach house was exactly as pretentious as I'd expected, all glass and steel and white furniture, perched on a cliff overlooking the Pacific. It screamed new money, desperation to impress. Richard's taste had always been ostentatious, but this went beyond that into the realm of parody. I arrived early, parking my sensible sedan next to a gleaming sports car that had to be Vanessa's. The front door was unlocked, so I walked in, taking in the space that my husband had created for his mistress while I maintained our family home. The living room opened onto a massive deck with an infinity pool that seemed to spill directly into the ocean below. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered spectacular views of the coastline. A floating staircase led to the upper level, where I presumed the master suite was located, the same one I'd seen in the surveillance video. Like what you see? Vanessa's voice came from behind me. I turned to find her standing in the entryway to the kitchen, wearing white linen pants and a silk blouse, looking more like she was prepared for a photo shoot than a confrontation. But her eyes were hard, wary. It's a bit much, I replied honestly. But then, Richard always did have a flair for the dramatic. That's one thing we can agree on. She moved into the living room, keeping her distance from me. So, you said you wanted to talk. Talk. I know what happened the night Richard died, I said, watching her face carefully. I know he was supposed to take heart medication that you picked up for him. I know that without that medication, given his condition, he was at high risk for a fatal cardiac event. And I know that when he died, no medication was found in his system or his hotel room. Vanessa's expression remained neutral, but a muscle twitched in her jaw. That's quite a theory. It's more than a theory. I have the emails, the pharmacy records, the medical files. Everything. And what exactly are you suggesting? That I somehow what? Prevented him from taking his medication? That's hardly murder, Eleanor. No, I agreed. It's not. But withholding life-saving medication from someone you know needs it? That could be criminal negligence at the very least. She laughed, a brittle sound. You'd never prove it. And even if you could, what would be the point? Richard is gone. Nothing will bring him back. Justice would be the point, I said quietly. And making sure you don't profit from his death. Vanessa moved to the bar along one wall, pouring herself a drink. She didn't offer me one. Is that what this is really about? The money? Isn't that what it's always been about for you? She took a sip of her drink, considering me over the rim of the glass. You know nothing about me or what I wanted from Richard. I know you threatened to expose his financial crimes if he didn't divorce me and change his will in your favor. I have that on video, actually. That got a reaction, a slight widening of her eyes, a tightening of her grip on the glass. What video? The one from his private office, the day before he died. The one where you told him it was his last chance to do what you wanted. For the first time, I saw real fear flicker across Vanessa's face. You're bluffing. I'm not. Just like I'm not bluffing about going to the police with everything I've found. I took a step toward her. Unless we can come to an arrangement. What kind of arrangement? She asked cautiously. You walk away. From all of it. The money Richard left you in his will. The offshore accounts you've been accessing. This house and all the other properties. You sign everything over to me, and in return, I don't go to the police with my suspicions about Richard's death." Vanessa laughed again, but there was an edge of desperation to it now. "You're insane. I'm not giving up everything based on your wild theories." "They're not theories. They're facts, backed by evidence. Evidence I've already shared with my lawyer, my financial investigator, and my son. If anything happens to me, they'll take it all to the authorities." I took another step toward her. "Think about it, Vanessa. Even if you're eventually cleared, do you want to spend the next few years fighting criminal charges? Watching your reputation, your lifestyle, everything you've built crumble while you're tied up in court?" She stared at me, calculation clear in her eyes. "You're bluffing," she said again, but with less conviction. "Try me." We stood there, two women who had loved the same man, now locked in a battle for everything he'd left behind. The irony wasn't lost on me, that after all Richard had done, all his manipulations and betrayals, it would come down to this moment between Vanessa and me. "I need time to think," she finally said. "You have 24 hours, I replied. "After that, I go to the police with everything I have." She set down her glass with a deliberate click. "You know, I never understood what Richard saw in you. You always seemed so passive, so willing to look the other way while he did whatever he wanted." "People change," I said simply. "Apparently." She studied me with new respect. "I'll have an answer for you tomorrow." I nodded and turned to leave, feeling her eyes boring into my back as I walked toward the door. I nearly reached it when her voice stopped me. "Eleanor." I turned. "How did you get into his laptop? What was the password?" I smiled faintly. "Wealth," I said. "Not love, not family. Just wealth." Something passed between us then. A moment of shared understanding about the man we'd both loved. The man who, in the end, had loved nothing as much as his money. I walked out of the beach house into the bright California sunshine, feeling lighter than I had in months. Whether Vanessa accepted my offer or not, I finally had the upper hand. And I intended to use it. What I didn't know was that Vanessa Carlyle had one more card to play, one that would change everything once again.
I didn't sleep that night.
How could I? My mind kept replaying the confrontation with Vanessa, analyzing her reactions, her words, the fleeting expressions that had crossed her perfect face when I revealed what I knew. Had I pushed too hard? Not hard enough. Would she capitulate or fight back? By morning, I was exhausted but wired, fueled by nervous energy and too much coffee. I'd called Daniel as soon as I returned from Malibu, updating him on everything: Richard's heart condition, the missing medication, my ultimatum to Vanessa. "It's thin," he'd warned. Suggestive, certainly, but not the kind of evidence that would guarantee a conviction. "It doesn't need to guarantee a conviction," I'd replied. "It just needs to be credible enough to scare her." Now, as the 24-hour deadline approached, I paced my living room, waiting for the phone to ring. Michael had insisted on being there, worried about how Vanessa might respond to my ultimatum. "Mom," he said gently, watching me wear a path in the carpet, "maybe you should sit down." "I can't," I admitted. "I'm too nervous." "What exactly are you expecting to happen?" I stopped pacing, considering the question. "Best case scenario? Vanessa agrees to sign everything over to avoid an investigation into your father's death. Worst case? She calls my bluff, and I have to decide whether to go to the police." "And if you do go to the police?" Michael asked. "Do you really want to put us through that kind of public scrutiny? Everyone would know about Dad's affair, his financial dealings, everything. Don't you want justice for your father?" I asked, surprised by his hesitation. Michael sighed, running a hand through his hair, a gesture so like Richard's that it made my heart ache. "I don't know what justice looks like in this situation, Mom. Dad wasn't innocent in all this. He was hiding money, planning to leave you, having an affair. I'm not saying he deserved what happened, but it's not as black and white as you're making it out to be." Before I could respond, my phone rang. Vanessa's number flashed on the screen. I took a deep breath and answered. "Hello, Vanessa." "I've thought about your offer," she said without preamble, her voice cool and controlled. And I have a counterproposal. Meet me at Riverside Park by the fountain." 1 hour. I frowned. Why not discuss this over the phone? Because what I have to show you can't be explained over the phone. 1 hour, Eleanor. Come alone. She hung up before I could respond. What did she say? Michael asked anxiously. She wants to meet in person. At Riverside Park. You're not going, he said immediately. Of course I am. Mom, it could be a trap. After everything that's happened, the break-in, the threats, you can't seriously be considering meeting her alone in a park. It's a public place, I pointed out. In broad daylight. What's she going to do? Push me into the fountain? This isn't funny, Michael insisted. At least let me come with you. I'll stay back, out of sight, but close enough to intervene if something goes wrong. I wanted to refuse, to prove I could handle Vanessa on my own, but the worry in my son's eyes stopped me. Fine, I conceded. But you stay far enough back that she doesn't spot you. I don't want her spooked. Riverside Park was busy that afternoon. Mothers with strollers, joggers, elderly couples on benches enjoying the sunshine. I spotted Vanessa immediately, seated on the edge of the large central fountain, sunglasses hiding her eyes, a large designer handbag at her side. As I approached, I scanned the area, spotting Michael about 50 yards away, pretending to read a newspaper on a park bench. Knowing he was there gave me confidence as I walked up to Vanessa. Right on time, she observed, not bothering to stand. I'm punctual, I replied, remaining standing to maintain the psychological advantage of height. You said you had something to show me. I do. She reached into her handbag and withdrew a manila envelope, holding it but not offering it to me. Do you know what this is? I'm assuming it's relevant to our discussion, or I wouldn't be here. A small smile played at the corners of her mouth. Always so proper, Eleanor. So controlled. It's what Richard hated most about you, you know. He said being married to you was like being married to a very polite robot. The barb stung, but I kept my expression neutral. Is insulting me part of your counterproposal? No, she conceded. Just an observation. She tapped the envelope against her knee. This contains the original draft of the new will Richard was preparing before he died. The one that would have left everything, and I do mean everything, to me. My stomach clenched. You're bluffing. If you had that, you would have used it by now. Would I? She cocked her head. Think about it, Eleanor. If I'd contested the will immediately after Richard's death, what would have happened? A long, public legal battle. Scrutiny of Richard's finances, including those offshore accounts. Questions about how and why a healthy man suddenly died of a heart attack. No, it was much simpler to accept what the current will provided and access the rest discreetly. Until I froze the accounts, I said, understanding dawning. Until you froze the accounts, she agreed. You forced my hand, Eleanor. So here we are. What exactly are you proposing? A truce. You unfreeze the offshore accounts and transfer your half of the estate to me, as Richard intended. In return, I don't contest the current will with this. She held up the envelope. And we both keep our suspicions about Richard's death to ourselves. I stared at her, momentarily speechless. You want me to give you everything? I want what Richard wanted me to have, she corrected. What he was in the process of legally arranging when he died. And if I refuse, then I file this with the probate court, challenge the current will, and let the chips fall where they may. Her smile turned cold. Of course, that would mean opening everything up to public scrutiny. Richard's finances, his private life, the circumstances of his death. Are you prepared for that kind of exposure, Eleanor? For everyone to know the truth about your marriage? You're overlooking something, I said, fighting to keep my voice steady. I have evidence suggesting you were involved in Richard's death. If you force this into court, that evidence comes out too. Your evidence is circumstantial at best, she scoffed. Mine is a legal document prepared by Richard's attorney, expressing his clear intentions. Have you verified it's authentic? Documents can be forged, Vanessa. A flicker of uncertainty crossed her face, so brief I almost missed it. It's authentic. Then you won't mind if I have my lawyer examine it? She hesitated, then held out the envelope. Be my guest. You have 48 hours to verify it and make your decision. After that, I file with the court. I took the envelope, feeling its weight in my hands, not just the physical weight of paper, but the weight of what it represented. If the document inside was genuine, it could change everything. 48 hours, I repeated. And Eleanor? Vanessa stood, adjusting her designer sunglasses. Don't try anything clever. I have copies, of course, and contingency plans in place if anything unfortunate happens to me. The same goes for you, I replied evenly. She smiled, a genuine smile this time, almost admiring. You know, in another life, I think we might have been friends. We're more alike than you realize. We are nothing alike, I said firmly. No. She tilted her head. We both loved the same man. We both were willing to fight for what we believed was ours. And we both, her voice dropped to a near whisper, know exactly what Richard was capable of. With that cryptic statement, she walked away, her heels clicking on the paved path, leaving me standing by the fountain with an envelope that might contain the end of everything I'd been fighting for. It looks authentic, Daniel said grimly, examining the document through a magnifying glass in his office later that day. The paper, the letterhead, the signatures, it all appears to be genuine. That's impossible, I insisted. Richard would never have left me with nothing after 38 years of marriage. Daniel gave me a sympathetic look. People do terrible things to those they once loved, Mrs. Mitchell, especially when they've moved on to someone new. Can she really use this to overturn the existing will? Michael asked. He joined us after the meeting with Vanessa, as concerned as I was about this new development. It's not a fully executed will, Daniel explained. It's a draft, prepared by Richard's attorney, but not yet signed. However, it does clearly indicate Richard's intentions at the time of his death. Combined with other evidence, emails, perhaps testimony from the attorney who prepared it, it could potentially be enough to challenge the existing will. So, what do we do? I asked, feeling desperation creeping in. Daniel leaned back in his chair, considering. We have a few options. We could fight it in court, argue that Richard was being coerced or that he wasn't of sound mind when he requested these changes. But that would be a lengthy, expensive battle with no guarantee of success. What's our alternative? Michael asked. We could negotiate. Offer Vanessa a settlement. Not everything she's asking for, but enough to make it worth her while to drop the matter. So she wins, I said bitterly. Not necessarily, Daniel replied. Remember, we still have the evidence regarding Richard's heart medication and Vanessa's potential involvement in his death. She may have this draft will, but we have something potentially much more damaging. Mutually assured destruction, Michael murmured. Precisely, Daniel nodded. Neither side can completely destroy the other without risking self-destruction. That usually creates favorable conditions for negotiation. I stood and walked to the window, looking out at the city below, the city where I'd spent my entire adult life as Mrs. Richard Mitchell, secure in the knowledge that whatever else happened, I was protected. Now that security was crumbling beneath my feet. There's something else we need to consider, I said, turning back to face them. Vanessa said something today that's been bothering me. She said we both knew what Richard was capable of.
What did she mean by that?
Daniel and Michael exchanged glances. Could be nothing, Daniel suggested. A manipulation tactic to unsettle you. Or it could be something specific, I insisted. Something about Richard that I don't know, but she thinks I do. Like what? Michael asked. I don't know, I admitted. But I think we need to find out. If there's something else, something we're missing about Richard, it could change everything. Daniel nodded slowly. I agree. Let's dig deeper into Richard's past, see if there's anything that might explain her comment. I'll help, Michael volunteered. I can go through Dad's old files, talk to his colleagues, see if anyone knows anything unusual. And I'll keep trying to access the data on his laptop, I added. There must be more there that we haven't found yet. As we left Daniel's office, I felt a renewed sense of purpose. Vanessa might have played her trump card with the draft will, but the game wasn't over. Not by a long shot. That evening, As I sat at my kitchen table with Richard's laptop open before me, my phone rang. The caller ID showed an unfamiliar number. "Hello." I answered cautiously. "Mrs. Mitchell?" A woman's voice, unfamiliar, slightly hesitant. "My name is Rebecca Winters. You don't know me, but I used to work for your husband." I sat up straighter. "What can I do for you, Ms. Winters?" "It's more what I can do for you," she replied. "I've been following the news about your husband's estate, the disputes with Ms. Carlyle. I think I have information that might help you." "What kind of information?" "Not over the phone," she said quickly. "Can we meet? Tomorrow morning, perhaps?" I hesitated, remembering Michael's concerns about my meeting with Vanessa. "How do I know this isn't some kind of trap?" "You don't," she admitted. "But I worked as your husband's executive assistant for 5 years before he replaced me with someone younger. I know things about his business practices, his relationship with Ms. Carlyle, things that might explain what's happening now." My curiosity was piqued. An executive assistant would have had access to Richard's schedule, his communications, possibly even his financial transactions. "Where and when?" I asked. "The cafe on 8th and Pine, 9 a.m., she said. "I'll be wearing a blue scarf." "I'll be there," I promised. After hanging up, I debated whether to tell Daniel or Michael about the meeting. Part of me wanted to go alone, to prove I could handle this myself. But another part, the smarter, more cautious part, knew that was foolish. I called Daniel. "Another mysterious informant?" he asked after I explained the call. "Interesting timing. You think it's a setup?" "I think we need to be careful," he said. "I'll come with you tomorrow, sit at another table like we did with your previous informant. If anything seems off, I'll intervene." I agreed, grateful for his support, then returned to Richard's laptop. I'd been methodically going through folders, emails, documents, anything that might shed light on what Vanessa had meant about what Richard was capable of. So far, I'd found nothing beyond what we already knew: the offshore accounts, the hidden properties, the financial manipulations. Richard had been a dishonest businessman and an unfaithful husband, but was there something worse I was missing? I decided to try a different approach. Instead of looking for financial records or communications with Vanessa, I searched for Rebecca Winters' name. Several emails appeared, most mundane office correspondence from years earlier. But one caught my eye, sent from Richard to someone named Marcus, with Rebecca's name in the subject line. Rebecca Winters' situation handled. I opened it. "Marcus. The Rebecca situation has been resolved. She's accepted the severance package and signed the NDA. She won't be a problem for us going forward. Make sure the Westlake account is adjusted to reflect the payment." Non-disclosure agreement. Richard had paid Rebecca to keep quiet about something connected to an account called Westlake. I searched for Westlake and found a folder buried deep in Richard's archived files. Inside were financial statements for a company called Westlake Investments, dating back 8 years. The statements showed regular transfers of large sums to offshore accounts, the same pattern we'd seen with Richard's other hidden funds, but on a much larger scale. But what caught my attention was a name listed as a co-signatory on the account: Marcus Stain. Richard's oldest friend and business partner before Martin, the same Marcus mentioned in the email about Rebecca. I sat back, puzzled. What was Richard's connection to Westlake Investments? And why had Rebecca Winters been paid to keep quiet about it? The answer might be waiting for me tomorrow morning at the cafe on 8th and Pine. The cafe was busy when I arrived the next morning, filled with the pre-work crowd grabbing coffee and pastries. Daniel was already there, seated at a corner table with a newspaper and a cup of coffee, just as we'd planned. I scanned the room, looking for a woman with a blue scarf. There, at a table by the window, a slender woman in her 40s with auburn hair, a blue silk scarf draped around her neck. She spotted me at the same moment and raised a hand in tentative greeting. As I approached her table, I studied her face, trying to remember if I'd ever met her during her time working for Richard. Nothing came to mind, but that wasn't surprising. Richard had kept his work life separate from our home life, rarely bringing colleagues to dinner or mentioning them in conversation. "Mrs. Mitchell," she stood as I reached the table, extending her hand. "Thank you for coming." Ms. Winters, I replied, shaking her hand and taking the seat across from her. You said you have information that might help me? She nodded, glancing nervously around the cafe before leaning forward. I worked for your husband from 2014 to 2019 until he replaced me with Vanessa Carlisle's younger sister. That was news to me. Vanessa's sister worked for Richard? Lisa Carlisle, yes. That's how Richard met Vanessa in the first place, through Lisa. But that's not what I wanted to tell you about. Rebecca fidgeted with her scarf. I was let go because I discovered something I wasn't supposed to know about. Something about a company called Westlake Investments. My pulse quickened. What about Westlake? It wasn't a real company, she said softly. It was a shell, created to move money for certain clients. Clients with connections to organized crime. I felt as if the air had been sucked from my lungs. Are you saying Richard was laundering money for criminals? Rebecca nodded, her expression grim. Not just Richard. Marcus Dane was the primary contact. Richard handled the financial structures, the movement of funds. It started small, just one client with cash flow challenges, as they called it. But it grew. By the time I discovered what was happening, they were moving millions through Westlake and similar entities. How did you find out? I asked, struggling to process this revelation. I was preparing documents for Richard's meeting with a potential new client. The names seemed familiar, so I did some research. Turned out he was under federal investigation for racketeering and fraud. I asked Richard about it, concerned we might be getting involved with someone unsavory. He brushed me off, said it was nothing to worry about. She paused, taking a sip of her coffee with a slightly trembling hand. But I couldn't let it go. I started looking more closely at other clients, at the movement of funds through accounts I had access to. That's when I realized what was happening. And Richard found out you knew?
Yes.
He called me into his office one evening, confronted me, said I had a choice, take a generous severance package and sign an NDA or... She trailed off. Or what? I prompted. He didn't specify, but the threat was clear. Rebecca's eyes met mine. Your husband could be very intimidating when he wanted to be, Mrs. Mitchell. I thought about the Richard the first knew, charming, ambitious, occasionally distant, but never threatening. Had I been married to a man capable of threatening an employee who discovered his illegal activities? It seemed impossible, yet the evidence was mounting. Why are you telling me this now? I asked. You signed an NDA. You're risking legal action. Because Richard is dead, and his NDA doesn't cover what I'm seeing now with Vanessa Carlisle. She leaned forward again, lowering her voice further. Mrs. Mitchell, Vanessa knows about Westlake. She knows everything. In fact, I believe she and her sister were deliberately placed in Richard's orbit by the same people he was working for. What people? I asked, feeling increasingly out of my depth. I don't know names, Rebecca admitted, but Marcus would know. He was the point of contact.
Marcus Dane, he repeated.
Where is he now? Last I heard, he'd moved to Arizona after selling his share of the business to Richard. But Mrs. Mitchell, her expression turned urgent. You need to be careful. If Vanessa is connected to these people, confronting her could be dangerous. More dangerous than you realize. Is that why you wanted to warn me? Because you think I'm in danger? Rebecca nodded. When I saw the news about the disputes over Richard's estate, the frozen accounts, I knew it was only a matter of time before someone connected the dots back to Westlake. And if that happens while you're publicly fighting with Vanessa? She didn't need to finish the thought. If Richard had indeed been laundering money for criminals, and if Vanessa was connected to those same criminals, my attempts to reclaim Richard's hidden assets could be putting me in the crosshairs of people far more dangerous than a vengeful mistress. Thank you for telling me this, I said sincerely. It can't have been easy to come forward. It wasn't, she agreed. But I couldn't live with myself if something happened to you, because I stayed silent. She reached into her purse and withdrew a flash drive, sliding it across the table to me. This contains everything I managed to download before I was let go: account numbers, client lists, transaction records. It's 5 years old, but it might help you understand what you're dealing with. I pocketed the drive, my mind racing with implications. Rebecca, would you be willing to speak with my lawyer about all this? Your testimony could be crucial if this ends up in court. She hesitated, fear crossing her face. I don't know. The NDA may not be enforceable if it was signed to conceal illegal activity, I pointed out. And Richard is gone. The only people who could pursue legal action against you would be his heirs, me and, potentially, Vanessa. I can assure you, I won't be suing you for telling the truth. After a moment's consideration, she nodded. All right, but not here, not now. Have your lawyer contact me. She wrote a number on a napkin and passed it to me. This is my direct line. No one else has this number. As Rebecca left the cafe, Daniel joined me at the table, sliding into the seat she had vacated. Well, he asked, anything useful? More than useful, I replied, my voice barely above a whisper. Potentially explosive. We need to talk privately. Back at Daniel's office, I recounted everything Rebecca had told me, showing him the flash drive she had provided. Money laundering for organized crime, Daniel repeated, looking stunned. That's significantly more serious than tax evasion or hiding assets from a spouse. And potentially more dangerous, I added. If Vanessa is connected to these people, as Rebecca suggested, then freezing those accounts and challenging her claim to Richard's estate could be seen as interfering with their operations, Daniel finished the thought. Which would explain the break-in, the escalating threats. What do we do now? I asked. Daniel ran a hand through his hair, a gesture that reminded me of Michael and, painfully, of Richard. First, we need to verify this information. I have contacts who can help us confirm whether Westlake Investments was indeed linked to known criminal organizations. And if it was, then we need to be extremely careful about our next steps. This changes the calculus considerably. Should we go to the authorities? I asked. Possibly, but that comes with its own risks. If these people are as connected as Rebecca suggests, there's no guarantee the authorities could protect you effectively. Daniel fixed me with a serious gaze. Mrs. Mitchell, Ellie, I need to ask you something important. Knowing what you know now, are you sure you want to continue pursuing this? The stakes have just gotten considerably higher. I considered the question carefully. Was recovering Richard's hidden millions worth potentially putting myself in danger from organized crime? Was punishing Vanessa worth the risk? But then I remembered her words at my son's wedding. You're no longer part of this family. The humiliation I'd felt, sitting alone while she preened in the front row like she belonged there. The violation of the break-in, someone moving through my home in the darkness, threatening my sense of security. The revelation that Richard had been planning to leave me with nothing after 38 years of marriage. Yes, I said firmly. I want to continue, but I want to be smart about it. Daniel nodded, respect evident in his eyes. Then let's start by examining what's on this flash drive. If Richard was involved in money laundering, and if Vanessa knows about it or is connected to it, that gives us significant leverage, not just against her, but potentially as a bargaining chip with the authorities if things get dangerous. As Daniel connected the flash drive to his computer, I felt a strange mixture of emotions. Fear at what we might discover, anger at Richard for involving himself in something so dangerous, and an odd sense of validation. If Richard had been laundering money for criminals, it explained so much. His secretiveness, his frequent business trips, the complex web of offshore accounts and shell companies. It also meant that the man I'd been married to for 38 years had been living a double life even more sinister than I'd realized. Not just an unfaithful husband, but a criminal. The files on Rebecca's flash drive confirmed everything she had told us and more. Westlake Investments had indeed been a shell company used to move funds for clients with names that even I, with my limited knowledge of criminal organizations, recognized from news headlines over the years. Richard and Marcus had been careful, using multiple layers of companies and accounts to obscure the origins of the money, but the pattern was clear to anyone who knew what to look for. This is damning, Daniel said softly as we scrolled through spreadsheets documenting millions in transactions. If the authorities got hold of this, Richard would have been looking at serious federal charges. And now? I asked. Now, it's evidence that could potentially implicate Vanessa if she's been continuing these operations since Richard's death. A thought struck me. The offshore accounts I froze. Could they be part of this money laundering operation? Daniel frowned, cross-referencing account numbers.
Some of them, yes.
Which means you may have inadvertently interfered with the flow of funds for some very dangerous people. The implication hung heavy in the air between us. If I had disrupted a money laundering operation for organized crime, the break-in at my home might have been just the beginning. We need to find Marcus Dane, I decided. He's the key to understanding the full extent of this, and possibly Vanessa's involvement. I'll put my investigator on it right away, Daniel promised. In the meantime, I think we should consider additional security measures for you. If these people believe you're a threat to their operations. I understand, I said, though the idea of needing protection from criminal threats seemed surreal, like something from a movie, not my actual life. As I left Daniel's office that afternoon, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. Every passing car, every stranger on the sidewalk seemed suddenly suspicious. Was I being paranoid, or was my intuition warning me of genuine danger? Either way, I knew one thing for certain. I was in deeper than I'd ever imagined, and there was no easy way out. When I arrived home, I was surprised to find Michael's car in my driveway. He hadn't mentioned coming over today. I found him in Richard's study, surrounded by boxes of old files he must have brought from storage. Michael, what are you doing here? He looked up, his expression troubled.
Hey, Mom.
I've been going through Dad's old records, looking for anything that might explain what Vanessa meant about what he was capable of. And I found something concerning. My heart sank. Let me guess. Something about Westlake Investments. Michael's eyes widened. How did you know? I sighed, sinking into a chair. I had an enlightening meeting this morning with Richard's former executive assistant. She told me everything, how your father and Marcus Dane were laundering money for criminals through shell companies like Westlake.
Jesus, Michael Vispirit.
I knew Dad bent rules sometimes, but this is something else entirely. There's more, I said, and told him about Rebecca's suggestion that Vanessa and her sister had been deliberately placed in Richard's orbit by the same criminal elements he was working for. Michael listened in stunned silence, his face growing paler with each revelation. Mom, this is serious. If Vanessa has connections to organized crime, and you've been freezing accounts they use. I know, I said grimly. Daniel's already warned me about the potential danger. He's arranging additional security. Security isn't enough, Michael insisted. You need to back off, at least until we understand the full picture. Let the accounts go. Let Vanessa have what she wants. It's not worth risking your life over. And let her win? I asked. Let her walk away with everything, after what she's done? Yes, if the alternative is putting yourself in danger from people who kill for a living. Michael ran a hand through his hair in frustration. Mom, please. This isn't about pride or justice anymore. This is about your safety. Part of me knew he was right. The rational, self-preserving part that had kept me alive for 60 years. But another part, the part that had been humiliated, betrayed, and pushed too far, refused to back down. Let me think about it, I said finally, a compromise that satisfied neither of us. Michael stayed for dinner, both of us avoiding further discussion of Richard's criminal activities or the potential danger I faced. As he was leaving, he embraced me tightly. Promise me you'll be careful, he whispered. I promise, I replied, meaning it. I might be determined, but I wasn't foolish. I had no intention of unnecessarily risking my life. After Michael left, I double-checked all the doors and windows, set the alarm system, and tried to settle in for the night. But sleep eluded me, my mind racing with everything I'd learned and the decisions that lay ahead. Around midnight, my phone rang. Unknown number. Hello. I answered cautiously. Mrs. Mitchell. A man's voice, unfamiliar, with a slight accent I couldn't place. I believe we have matters to discuss. Who is this? My name is irrelevant. What matters is that you have been interfering with business arrangements that don't concern you. A chill ran down my spine. I don't know what you're talking about. I think you do, the voice replied, calm but with an undercurrent of menace. Certain accounts have been frozen. Certain questions have been asked about Westlake investments. This is problematic. So it was true. Vanessa was connected to the criminal organizations Richard had been laundering money for. And now they were contacting me directly. What do you want? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. For you to unfreeze the accounts and stop asking questions. In return, you get to continue your comfortable life without complications. Are you threatening me? I'm offering you a business solution, the voice corrected. One that benefits all parties. You release the accounts. We ensure your safety and privacy. Everyone wins. And if I refuse? A pause. That would be unwise, Mrs. Mitchell. Very unwise indeed. You have 24 hours to consider our offer. We'll be in touch. The line went dead. I sat in the darkness of my living room, the phone still clutched in my hand, fear and anger warring within me. They were threatening me now, not just Vanessa, but whoever she was working with. Dangerous people who wouldn't hesitate to harm me if I continued to interfere with their operations. The smart thing would be to do as they asked. Unfreeze the accounts, walk away from the fight with Vanessa, forget everything I'd learned about Richard's criminal activities. But something in me rebelled at the thought of giving in to threats, of letting them win after everything they'd taken from me. I was tired of being the victim, the discarded wife, the woman who looked the other way while others took what was rightfully hers.
No.
There had to be another way. I picked up the phone again and dialed Daniel's number, not caring about the late hour. When he answered, groggy with sleep, I spoke without preamble. I just received a threatening call from someone connected to Westlake. They want me to unfreeze the accounts and stop asking questions. Daniel was instantly alert. Did they identify themselves?
No.
But the message was clear. Do as they say or face complications. This changes things, Daniel said grimly. We need to move quickly. I'm coming over. Don't open the door for anyone but me. While I waited for Daniel to arrive, I sat in Richard's study, surrounded by the remnants of his life, his books, his papers, the photographs on the wall showing a smiling family that had never been as perfect as it appeared. Had he known what he was getting into when he started working with Marcus Dane? Had he understood the danger he was placing himself, and by extension me in? And Vanessa. Had she been part of it from the beginning, a plant meant to give these criminals another hook into Richard? Or had she simply seen an opportunity and taken it, aligning herself with dangerous people to secure her own interests? I supposed it didn't matter now. What mattered was finding a way out of this mess that didn't end with me dead or penniless. When Daniel arrived, his normally rumpled appearance was even more disheveled, his hair uncombed, his shirt buttoned incorrectly. But his eyes were sharp, focused. We need to contact the authorities, he said as soon as I let him in. This has gone beyond civil disputes and potential criminal negligence. You're being directly threatened by what appears to be organized crime. And tell them what? I asked. That my late husband was laundering money for criminals and now they're threatening me because I froze some accounts? I'd be implicating Richard in serious crimes. Richard is beyond the reach of the law, Daniel pointed out. And you're in danger. The FBI has witness protection programs for situations exactly like this. Witness protection. The phrase hung in the air between us, its implications staggering. A new identity, a new life somewhere else, cut off from everything and everyone I knew. There has to be another option, I insisted. Daniel paced the room, thinking. Maybe there is. What if we approach this from a different angle? Instead of going directly to the authorities, what if we use what we know as leverage against Vanessa?
How?
She must be the link between Richard's operations and whoever called you tonight. If we can convince her that it's in her best interest to help us defuse the situation, why would she help us? I asked skeptically. Because she has as much to lose as anyone if this all comes to light. If Richard was laundering money, and she's continued those operations since his death, she could be looking at serious federal charges. That's powerful motivation to find a mutually beneficial solution. I considered this. So we offer her a deal. She helps us resolve the situation with her criminal associates, and in return, we don't turn over everything we have to the FBI, Daniel finished. It's a gamble, but it might be our best option short of witness protection. As we discussed the details of this potential approach, my phone rang again. Michael's number. Michael? Is everything okay? I answered, concerned about the late hour. His voice was tight with fear. Mom, someone just tried to break into my house. Julia and I are okay. They ran when the alarm went off, but the police said it looked professional. Not a random burglary attempt. My blood ran cold. Where are you now? A hotel. We didn't feel safe staying at home. Don't tell me where, I said quickly. It's better if I don't know. Mom, what's going on? Michael's voice cracked with strain. Is this connected to everything with Dad and Vanessa? I looked at Daniel, who nodded grimly. Yes, honey, I think it is. And it's my fault. I'm so sorry I've dragged you into this. It's not your fault, Michael insisted. It's Dad's and Vanessa's and whoever they got involved with. But Mom, this has gone too far. People are threatening our family now. You need to go to the police. We're figuring that out right now, I assured him. Daniel's here with me. We're going to fix this, Michael. I promise. After I hung up, I turned to Daniel, a new resolve hardening within me. They went after my son. My family. This ends now. Daniel nodded, understanding the shift in my determination. We need to move quickly before they escalate further. I have a contact at the FBI, someone I trust. Let me call him, explain the situation. See what options we have. As Daniel made his call, stepping into the kitchen for privacy, I sat in Richard's chair, surrounded by the life he'd built and the secrets he'd kept. The anger that had been simmering within me for months crystallized into something harder, colder, more focused. These people, whoever they were, had threatened me. They had threatened my son. They had invaded my home, violated my sense of security. And for what? Money. Power. Control. Well, they had picked the wrong widow to intimidate. Daniel returned, his expression cautiously optimistic. My contact is interested. Very interested. Apparently, they've been trying to build a case against several of the names in those Westlake files for years. Your information could be the break they've been waiting for. What would I have to do? Meet with them. Share what we know. Potentially agree to assist in their investigation. He hesitated. It could still be dangerous, Ellie. These people don't take kindly to informants. I understand, I said. But I won't live in fear. And I won't let them threaten my family. Daniel studied me for a moment, then nodded. I'll set up the meeting for tomorrow. In the meantime, you shouldn't stay here. It's not safe. Where should I go? I have a cabin about 2 hours from the city. Remote, secure. No one knows about it except my closest friends. You'll be safe there until we meet with the FBI. As I packed an overnight bag, moving quietly through my darkened house, I was struck by the surreal turn my life had taken. 6 months ago, I had been Mrs. Richard Mitchell, respectable widow, living a quiet life of comfortable routine. Now I was fleeing my home in the middle of the night, running from criminal threats, preparing to meet with the FBI about my late husband's money laundering operations. Life had a way of surprising you, even at 60. Daniel drove us to his cabin, taking a circuitous route with frequent turns and doubling back to ensure we weren't followed. The cabin itself was rustic but comfortable, nestled among pine trees beside a small lake, far from any neighbors. No one will find you here, Daniel assured me as he showed me around. Try to get some rest. Tomorrow will be a long day. But rest wouldn't come. I sat by the window, watching the moonlight on the lake, thinking about everything that had led me to this point. The discovery of Richard's affair, his sudden death, the will that divided his estate between Vanessa and me, the hidden accounts, the threats, and underneath it all, the burning question, how had I been married to a man for 38 years without knowing who he really was? Dawn was breaking when my phone buzzed with a text message. I had expected it to be from Daniel, confirming our meeting with the FBI. Instead, it was from an unknown number. Check your email. Now. With trembling fingers, I opened my email app. A new message waited from an anonymous sender with an attachment. I clicked to download it, my heart pounding. It was a photograph. of Michael and Julia, asleep in what must be their hotel room. Someone had been in their room, close enough to take this picture, while they slept unaware. Below the photo was a message: release the accounts by noon, or next time they won't wake up. Horror washed over me in a wave so powerful, I thought I might be sick. They had found Michael. They had been in his room while he slept. This was no longer about money or revenge or justice. This was about my family's survival. I called Michael immediately, my hands shaking so badly I could hardly hold the phone. "Mom," he answered, groggy with sleep. "What's wrong? Are you and Julia okay?" I demanded. "Yeah, we're fine. Just woke up." "Why?" "Someone was in your room last night. They took a picture of you sleeping. They just sent it to me with a threat." There was a moment of stunned silence, then a rustle of movement. That's impossible. The door was locked, the security latch engaged. "Check the room," I insisted. "See if anything's disturbed." I heard Michael moving around, his breathing quick and shallow. Nothing seems out of place, but
Jesus, mon.
if they got in here without us knowing. "Listen to me," I said, trying to keep my voice steady despite the fear coursing through me. "You and Julia need to check out immediately. Go somewhere public, a mall, a restaurant, anywhere with lots of people. Stay there until I contact you again." "What are you going to do?" he asked. I closed my eyes, knowing there was only one answer now. What they want. "I'm going to release the accounts." "Mom, no." "Michael, they were in your room. They threatened to kill you. This isn't a game anymore." My voice cracked. "I can't lose you. Not for money, not for justice, not for anything." After hanging up, I called Daniel and told him about the threat. "Don't do anything yet," he urged. "The meeting with the FBI is in 3 hours. They can protect Michael and Julia." "In 3 hours, anything could happen," I argued. "I'm not taking that chance with my son's life. Ellie, think about this. If you give in now, you're showing them their tactics work. There's no guarantee they'll stop there." He had a point, but the image of Michael and Julia, vulnerable in their sleep while someone stood over them with a camera, overrode all other considerations. "I'm sorry, Daniel. I have to protect my family." Before he could argue further, I hung up and called Catherine. Despite the early hour, she answered immediately. "Mrs. Mitchell? Is everything all right?" "No," I said frankly. "I need you to unfreeze all the accounts immediately. All of them."
What?
"Why?" She sounded alarmed. "We've made so much progress. They're threatening my son's life." I cut her off. "Nothing is worth that risk. Please, Catherine."
Do it now.
There was a brief silence, then a resigned sigh. "I understand. I'll start the process immediately. It will take a few hours for all the banks to process the releases." "Thank you," I said, relief washing through me despite the bitter taste of defeat. "Let me know as soon as it's done." After hanging up, I sent a text to the unknown number. "I've initiated the release of all accounts. It will take a few hours to process. Please leave my family alone." The response came almost immediately. Wise decision. I sat by the window, watching the sun rise over the lake, feeling hollow. I had lost. Vanessa and her criminal associates had won. All my efforts, all the evidence we'd gathered, all the plans we'd made, none of it mattered in the face of a direct threat to Michael's life. Daniel arrived at the cabin mid-morning, his expression a mixture of concern and frustration. "I wish you'd waited," he said as I let him in. "The FBI is very interested in what we have. They believe they could build a case against several major players using the Westlake information." "At what cost?" I asked wearily. "My son's safety? His life? It's not worth it, Daniel." "I understand," he said, softening. "Family comes first. But now that you've agreed to their demands, we need to think about next steps. Unfreezing the accounts won't make you safe. They know you know too much." The truth of his words sank in. I might have bought temporary reprieve for Michael and Julia, but my own situation remained precarious. As long as I possessed evidence of Richard and Vanessa's criminal activities, I was a liability. "So, what do we do?" I asked. We still meet with the FBI, Daniel said firmly. But we adjust our approach. Instead of offering to help with their investigation, we focus on securing protection for you and your family. Witness protection, if necessary. Leave everything behind. The thought was staggering. My home, my friends, my identity? It may be the only way to ensure your safety in the long term. As we prepared to leave for the FBI meeting, my phone buzzed with another text from the unknown number. Good work on the accounts. One more thing. Bring all copies of the Westlake files to the beach house. 3 p.m. today. Come alone or consequences will follow. I showed Daniel the message. It's a trap, he said immediately. They get you alone, take the files, and make sure you can never threaten them again. I know, I agreed. But what choice do I have? If I don't show up, they'll assume I'm going to the authorities and might retaliate against Michael. Daniel paced the small cabin thinking, we need to buy time. Respond that you'll be there, but you need until 5 p.m. to gather everything. I did as he suggested, receiving a terse 5 p.m. Don't be late in response. That gives us a few more hours, Daniel said. Time to meet with the FBI and figure out our options. The meeting with the FBI took place in an anonymous office building downtown. 2 agents, a middle-aged man named Harris and a younger woman named Chen, listened intently as we laid out everything: Richard's money laundering through Westlake Investments, Vanessa's apparent connection to the criminal organizations involved, the threatening calls and texts, the break-ins, and the photo of Michael and Julia. This is extremely serious, Agent Harris said when we finished. Based on the names in these Westlake files, you've stumbled into an operation we've been tracking for years. These are dangerous people, Mrs. Mitchell. Very dangerous. I'm aware, I said dryly. They've made that quite clear. The good news is, with the evidence you've provided, we may finally have enough to move against some key players, Agent Chen added. The bad news is that puts you and your family at significant risk. Which is why I've already released the accounts, I reminded them, and why I've agreed to turn over all copies of the Westlake files this afternoon. The agents exchanged glances. Mrs. Mitchell, Agent Harris said carefully, I understand your desire to protect your family, but handing over that evidence doesn't guarantee your safety. In fact, it potentially makes you more vulnerable. What are you suggesting? I asked, though I already knew the answer. Witness protection, Agent Chen said. For you and your son's family. New identities, new location, a fresh start where these people can't find you. Just as Daniel had predicted. I closed my eyes briefly, the weight of the decision pressing down on me. Leave everything behind. My home, my friends, the life I'd built over 60 years. Start again somewhere new, with a new name, a new history. And the alternative? I asked. Agent Harris's expression was grave. We can try to offer protection without relocation, but I won't lie to you, it would be less secure. These organizations have resources, connections. They can be very persistent when they feel threatened. And very creative in their methods, Agent Chen added. The fact that they were able to access your son's hotel room despite security measures indicates a high level of sophistication. I thought about it, truly thought about it, about what it would mean to walk away from everything, about what it would mean to live looking over my shoulder for the rest of my life. Before I decide, I said finally, I want to understand exactly what would happen if I agree to witness protection. And I want to know what happens to Vanessa Carlisle. Agent Harris nodded. That's fair. Let me walk you through the process. For the next hour, the agents explained how witness protection worked, what support would be provided, what limitations would be imposed. It wasn't an easy life they were offering, but it was a life, for me, for Michael and Julia, for any future grandchildren I might have. As for Vanessa, if I agreed to testify and provide all the evidence we'd gathered, she would likely face serious federal charges for money laundering, possibly conspiracy, and potentially accessories to other crimes committed by the organizations she was working with. She'd go to prison? I asked. Almost certainly, Agent Chen confirmed. For a considerable length of time. There was a certain satisfaction in that thought. Vanessa behind bars, stripped of the luxury and status she'd so desperately pursued. But was it worth the cost to me and my family? I need to discuss this with my son, I said finally. This affects his life too. Of course, Agent Harris agreed. But we don't have much time before your 5 p.m. meeting, and I strongly advise against actually going to that meeting. If I don't show up, they'll know something's wrong, I pointed out. We could send an agent in your place, Agent Chin suggested. Set up a sting operation, and risk them retaliating against my son? I shook my head.
No.
I need to go, or at least appear to go. After further discussion, we agreed on a compromise. I would drive to the beach house as instructed, but with FBI surveillance in place. I wouldn't enter the house, but would wait outside until agents could move in and secure the location. It wasn't perfect, but it gave us a chance to both appease Vanessa's criminal associates and potentially catch them in the act of threatening me. As we finalized the details, my phone rang. Michael. Mom, where are you? He asked without preamble. I've been trying to reach you. I'm safe, I assured him. I'm with Daniel and some new associates. We're working on a solution. Listen to me. Michael's voice was urgent. I need to tell you something important. Something about Dad and Vanessa. What is it? Not over the phone. Can you meet me? It's really important, Mom. I hesitated, looking at the FBI agents who were watching me with concern. I'm not sure that's a good idea right now, honey. There are some complications. Mom, please. It can't wait. It's about what happened the night Dad died. I found something that changes everything. My curiosity was piqued despite my caution. Where are you? The cafe near your house. The one with the blue awning. I'm here now. Michael, it might not be safe. I'm in a public place, Mom. I'm being careful. But this can't wait. Please. I looked at Daniel and the FBI agents, torn between my maternal instinct to go to my son and the logical awareness that it could be dangerous. Let us send someone with you, Agent Harris suggested. An agent who can stay out of sight but provide protection if needed. I nodded gratefully. All right, Michael. I'll be there in 30 minutes. Stay in the cafe, in public view. After hanging up, we quickly revised our plans. I would meet Michael at the cafe with an FBI agent nearby, then proceed to the beach house for the 5 p.m. meeting as agreed, but with full surveillance and protection in place. As we left the office building, I couldn't shake a sense of unease. Something about Michael's call felt off, though I couldn't put my finger on exactly what. He had sounded stressed, certainly, but that was understandable given the circumstances. And yet, is everything okay? Daniel asked, noticing my distraction. I'm not sure, I admitted. Something about Michael's call didn't feel right. In what way? I don't know exactly. Just not like him. I shook my head. I'm probably just being paranoid after everything that's happened. Daniel didn't look convinced. Maybe, but in this situation, a little paranoia is healthy. Let me call him back, just to verify. I nodded, handing over my phone. Daniel dialed Michael's number, putting it on speaker so we could both hear. The phone rang several times, then went to voicemail. That's odd, I said, worry creeping in. He just called me. He should have his phone with him. Daniel tried again with the same result. Could he have stepped away from his phone? Gone to the restroom, maybe? Maybe, I said, but the unease was growing stronger. Let me try calling Julia. Julia answered on the second ring. Ellie, is everything okay?
I'm fine, dear.
Is Michael with you? No. He went out about an hour ago to pick up some food. He should be back soon. Why? My blood ran cold. He called me just now, said he was at the cafe near my house. That he had something important to tell me about Richard and Vanessa. A pause. That's strange. He told me he was just going to the deli down the street from our hotel. We're nowhere near your house. I exchanged an alarmed look with Daniel. Julia, when Michael gets back, tell him not to go anywhere. Stay in your hotel room with the door locked until you hear from me or the FBI. Understand? The FBI? Her voice rose in panic. Ellie, what's going on? I can't explain right now, but it's important. Just do as I say, please. After hanging up, I turned to Daniel and the FBI agents who had been listening to the exchange. Someone is pretending to be Michael. They're trying to lure me to that cafe. A trap, Agent Harris said grimly. Which means they're getting desperate. They must suspect you've gone to the authorities. Or they never intended to honor the agreement in the first place, Agent Chin suggested. Release the accounts, get the files, eliminate the witness, a clean sweep. The clinical way she described my potential murder sent a shiver down my spine. So, what do we do now? I asked. We can use this, Agent Harris said, already typing on his phone. Set up our own trap. Send a team to the cafe, see who's waiting there for you. And the beach house meeting? Same plan, but with heightened security. If they're making moves this aggressive, we need to be prepared for anything. As the agents made their calls, coordinating teams and strategies, I sat quietly, a strange calm settling over me. The fear was still there, but beneath it was something else, a cold, clear resolve. These people had threatened my family, tried to manipulate me, attempted to lure me into a trap. They had underestimated me at every turn, seeing only a 60-year-old widow, easy to intimidate, easy to control. It was time to show them just how wrong they were. I want to go to the cafe, I said suddenly. 3 heads turned to me in surprise. Absolutely not, Daniel said immediately. It's too dangerous, Agent Chin agreed. Hear me out, I insisted. They're expecting me, not a team of FBI agents. The moment they see unfamiliar faces, they'll disappear. But if I show up, just as they planned, they could kill you, Daniel said bluntly. Not in a public cafe in broad daylight, I countered. And not with FBI agents watching. This is our chance to identify who's behind these threats. To see if Vanessa herself is involved or if she's working through intermediaries. Agent Harris considered this. She has a point. A controlled operation with Mrs. Mitchell as visible bait, but full surveillance and backup in place. It could work. It's too risky, Daniel argued. Everything about this situation is risky, I pointed out. But I'm tired of being on the defensive, reacting to their moves. It's time we set the terms of engagement. After further debate, a compromise was reached. I would go to the cafe but wearing a wire and with multiple FBI agents positioned both inside and outside. I would be visible but protected. As we finalized the details of the operation, my phone buzzed with a text from the unknown number. Change of plans. Beach house meeting moved to now. You have 30 minutes to get there. I showed the text to the others. They're panicking, Agent Harris said. Trying to force you to move before you can put protections in place. Or they've realized the cafe trap might not work and are switching strategies, Agent Chin suggested. Either way, it confirmed my suspicion that Vanessa and her associates were getting desperate, which made them both more dangerous and more vulnerable. Let's use this, I said. Tell them I'm on my way to the beach house. Meanwhile, your team can secure the cafe and see who's there waiting for me. A flurry of preparations followed. A wire was fitted beneath my clothing. Communications were established with the FBI teams already in position near both the cafe and the beach house, and final instructions were given. Remember, Agent Harris told me as we prepared to leave, your only job is to be visible and buy us time. At the first sign of danger, you get out. No heroics. I nodded, feeling strangely calm as we set the plan in motion. For months, I had been reacting to Richard's death, to Vanessa's threats, to the revelation of criminal connections. Now, finally, I was taking control. As we drove toward the beach house, I thought about how far I had come from that humiliated woman at Michael's wedding, silently enduring Vanessa's whispered taunt. You're no longer part of this family. She had been wrong. I was still very much part of this family, and I would do whatever it took to protect it, even if that meant facing down the woman who had tried to take everything from me. What I didn't know then was that the confrontation waiting for me at the beach house would reveal one final, devastating secret, one that would change everything I thought I knew about Richard, about Vanessa, and about the night my husband died. The drive to the Malibu beach house seemed to take both forever and no time at all. My mind raced with possibilities, scenarios, fears, but beneath it all was a strange, steely calm. Whatever waited for me at that glass fortress on the cliff, I was ready to face it. Agent Harris drove, while Agent Chin sat beside me in the back seat, reviewing the plan one last time. Remember, Mrs. Mitchell, your safety is our priority. The house is already under surveillance. We have agents positioned around the perimeter and a tactical team on standby. All you need to do is approach the house, engage briefly, and then withdraw when we give the signal. And if Vanessa is there? I asked. Engage normally, but be careful what you say. Don't reveal that you're working with us or that you know about Westlake's connections to organized crime. Just play along with whatever scenario they present. I nodded, touching the small microphone hidden beneath my blouse. And you'll hear everything? Every word, Agent Chen confirmed. If there's any indication of danger, we move in immediately. As we approached the private road leading to the beach house, Agent Harris pulled over. This is as far as we go together. The rest of the way, you're on your own, visibly at least. I took a deep breath, steeling myself. I understand. Just to confirm, Agent Chen said, your son is still safely at the hotel with his wife, correct?
Yes.
I spoke to Julia just before we left. They're staying put until this is over. Good. She handed me a small device that looked like a car key fob. This is a panic button. Press it if you feel threatened at any point, and we'll move in immediately. I slipped it into my pocket, drew another steadying breath, and opened the car door. Wish me luck. We'll be right behind you, Agent Harris assured me. Every step of the way. The remaining drive to the beach house took less than 5 minutes, but it felt like walking into another world. The narrow road wound along the coastline, multi-million-dollar homes perched on the cliffs to my right, the vast Pacific stretching to the horizon on my left. Such beauty, such privilege, and such darkness lurking beneath. As I pulled into the curved driveway of the beach house, I spotted a sleek black SUV already parked there. The vehicle had darkly tinted windows, making it impossible to see who might be inside. Beside it was Vanessa's red convertible, the top up despite the perfect weather. I parked, turned off the engine, and sat for a moment, gathering my resolve. Through my open window, I could hear the crash of waves against the rocks below, the cry of seagulls wheeling overhead. Such peaceful sounds for what might be a dangerous confrontation. I'm going in, I said aloud, knowing the agents would hear through my wire. The house appears occupied. 2 vehicles present. With that, I stepped out of my car and walked toward the front door, my head high, my pace measured. I would not show fear, not now. Before I could ring the bell, the door swung open. Vanessa stood there, immaculately dressed as always in white linen pants and a silk blouse, her hair perfectly styled, her makeup flawless. But her eyes, those were different. The cool confidence I'd always seen there had been replaced by something harder, more desperate. Eleanor, she said, her voice carefully controlled. Right on time. Come in. I stepped into the house, immediately scanning the open-concept living area. We weren't alone. A man sat on one of the white sofas facing the ocean view, tall, well-built, with silver hair and an expensive suit. As I entered, he stood, turning to face me. Mrs. Mitchell, he greeted me with a slight nod. Thank you for joining us. My breath caught in my throat as recognition dawned. Marcus Dane. Richard's former business partner, the man who, according to Rebecca Winters, had been the primary contact for the criminal organizations behind Westlake Investments. The man who had disappeared to Arizona after selling his share of the business to Richard. You remember me, he said with a small smile that didn't reach his eyes. I'm flattered. What are you doing here? I asked, genuine confusion momentarily overriding my caution. I thought you'd left the state years ago. I did, he confirmed. But when one's interests are threatened, sometimes a return is necessary. He gestured to one of the armchairs. Please sit. We have much to discuss. I remained standing. I was told to bring the Westlake files. I assume that's what this is about. Marcus and Vanessa exchanged glances, a silent communication passing between them that raised the hairs on the back of my neck. Among other things, Marcus said smoothly. You've been quite industrious these past few months, Eleanor. Discovering Richard's offshore accounts, freezing assets, investigating his business dealings. It's impressive, especially for someone with no background in finance. I had help, I said simply. Yes, Catherine Zhao. Daniel Harmon. Quite the team you've assembled. His casual mention of my associates sent a chill through me. They'd been watching me more closely than I'd realized. But what interests me most is how you came to possess information about Westlake Investments. That particular operation was known to very few people. I thought quickly, weighing how much to reveal. Richard kept records, I said finally. More than he probably realized. Marcus nodded thoughtfully. Richard was always meticulous. It was one of his greatest strengths as a business partner, and one of his greatest weaknesses. He moved toward the bar, pouring himself a drink. Would you like something? Water? Wine? No, thank you. He shrugged, taking a sip of his amber-colored liquor. As you wish. Now, about those files. I have them, I said, patting my handbag. But before I hand them over, I want some assurances. Such as? Vanessa spoke for the first time since greeting me, her voice tight with tension. That my family will be left alone. No more threats, no more break-ins, no more photographs. I fixed her with a hard stare, letting her know I was aware of her involvement in the threats against Michael. Vanessa had the grace to look uncomfortable, glancing away toward the ocean view. That seems reasonable, Marcus said, reclaiming my attention. The files in exchange for your family's safety. A fair trade. Something about his easy acquiescence made me uneasy. This was too simple, too clean. These people had been willing to threaten my son's life just hours ago. Why would they suddenly agree to back off with nothing but a stack of papers in return? And what about the offshore accounts? I asked. The ones I froze? Already being addressed, Marcus replied. Your financial investigator initiated the release process this morning, as instructed. Within 24 hours, everything should be back to normal. And then what? I pressed. You and Vanessa just continue as before? Using my late husband's money to launder funds for criminals. Marcus's expression hardened slightly. I wouldn't phrase it quite that way, but essentially yes. Business continues. Life goes on. You return to your comfortable existence, secure in the knowledge that your family is safe. He took another sip of his drink. It's a good deal, Eleanor. Better than most in your position would get. I glanced at Vanessa, who was watching our exchange with an unreadable expression. And you're okay with this arrangement? Asked her directly. Continuing Richard's criminal enterprises as if nothing happened? Something flickered in her eyes. Doubt? Fear? Resentment? It was gone too quickly to identify.
It's not that simple, she said. No?
I challenged. You've been accessing those accounts for months, living in properties purchased with laundered money, associating with people who threatened my son's life. Seems pretty straightforward to me. You don't understand, Vanessa snapped, her composure cracking. You think I had a choice? You think I wanted any of this? Vanessa, Marcus's voice held a warning. She ignored him, stepping closer to me, her eyes suddenly bright with what looked like unshed tears. You think I wanted to be with Richard? To play the adoring mistress to a man twice my age? To be involved with people like Marcus and his associates? Vanessa, that's enough, Marcus said more sharply. No, it's not enough. She whirled on him. I'm tired of this. Tired of the lies, the threats, the constant fear. She turned back to me. Do you want to know the truth, Eleanor? The real truth about your perfect husband and how he died. Marcus moved with surprising speed for a man his size, grabbing Vanessa's arm. I said that's enough. She wrenched away from him. Don't touch me. I'm done being controlled by you. By all of you. The tension in the room had escalated so quickly it left me momentarily stunned. This was not the cool, collected Vanessa I'd confronted at my son's wedding or even at our previous meeting in this very house. This was a woman on the edge, desperate and dangerous. What truth? I asked, unable to contain my curiosity despite the warning bells sounding in my mind. What about Richard's death? Vanessa laughed, a harsh, brittle sound. You think I killed him, don't you? Withheld his heart medication, knowing he'd have an attack.
She shook her head.
I wish it had been that simple. Vanessa, Marcus's voice had dropped to a menacing growl. Think very carefully about what you're about to say. She ignored him, her gaze locked with mine. Richard didn't die of a heart attack, Eleanor. He was murdered. By him. She pointed at Marcus. Because Richard was going to turn state's evidence against the entire Westlake operation. The room seemed to spin around me.
What?
It's true, Vanessa continued, words tumbling out now as if a dam had broken. Richard had contacted the FBI. He was gathering evidence, preparing to cut a deal. He was afraid of what these people might do to him, to you, to Michael if they discovered his financial crimes. So he decided to get ahead of it, to turn himself in and bring down the whole operation in exchange for leniency. And you knew about this? I asked, struggling to process this revelation. Not until it was too late, she said, her voice dropping. Richard told me the night before he died. Said he was doing it to protect us, to build a new life free from all this. She gestured around the luxurious room. He was going to confess everything, the money laundering, the offshore accounts, his relationship with me. Start fresh. That's a very touching story, Marcus cut in, his voice cold. But I'm afraid Mrs. Mitchell won't be sharing it with anyone. He reached into his jacket and withdrew a pistol, small but undoubtedly lethal, pointing it casually in my direction. This has gone far enough. My heart hammered in my chest, but I forced myself to remain calm. The FBI agents were listening. They would move in at the first sign of danger. All I needed to do was stall, keep them talking. You kill my husband, I said, the words feeling strange in my mouth. Despite everything, Richard's betrayal, his affair, his criminal activities, he had still been my husband for 38 years. The father of my son. And this man had murdered him. I did what was necessary, Marcus replied without a hint of remorse. Richard became a liability. He was emotional, unstable, making poor decisions because of his attachment to Vanessa. He glanced at her with disdain. I couldn't allow his sentimentality to destroy everything we'd built. So you what? I asked. Poisoned him? Made it look like a heart attack. Something like that, Marcus admitted. A substance that mimics the effects of cardiac arrest, untraceable in standard toxicology screens. Clean, efficient, and above all, natural appearing. No one questioned it. Not the paramedics, not the medical examiner, not even his grieving widow. A small, cold smile touched his lips. Until now. I glanced at Vanessa, who had backed away from both of us, her face pale. And you've been working with him? After he murdered Richard? I didn't have a choice, she whispered. He made it very clear what would happen if I didn't cooperate. To me, to my sister, to you, and Michael. Such dramatics, Marcus sighed. You had choices, Vanessa. You chose luxury security, the easy path. Don't pretend otherwise now. My mind was racing, trying to reconcile this new information with everything I'd believed. Richard hadn't been planning to leave me penniless for his mistress. He'd been preparing to confess, to make amends in his own way. Vanessa hadn't killed him by withholding medication. She'd been as much a victim of Marcus's schemes as I had, in her own way. It changed everything. And nothing. Because now Marcus Dane stood between me and the door, a gun in his hand, and murder in his eyes. So what happens now? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. You kill me too? Make it look like another tragic accident. Unfortunately, yes, Marcus said, as casually as if discussing the weather. You've become too curious, too persistent. Even if you hand over the Westlake files, you know too much now. You're a liability neither I nor my associates can afford. My hand slipped into my pocket, fingers closing around the panic button Agent Chen had given me. One press, and the FBI would storm the house. But before I could activate it, a new voice spoke from the doorway behind Marcus. That's not going to happen. Marcus whirled around, gun still in hand, to find Michael standing there, his own weapon raised and pointed steadily at Marcus's chest. "Michael," I gasped. "What are you doing here? You're supposed to be at the hotel with Julia." "Did you really think I'd let you face this alone, Mom?" he asked, his eyes never leaving Marcus. "Drop the gun.
Now."
Marcus's face twisted with fury. "You're making a mistake, young man. You have no idea who you're dealing with." "I know exactly who I'm dealing with," Michael replied, his voice steely. "The man who murdered my father. Now drop the gun, or I drop you." For a tense moment, no one moved. Then, slowly, Marcus lowered his weapon, placing it on the coffee table. "Kick it away," Michael instructed. Marcus complied, sending the gun skittering across the polished floor toward Vanessa, who flinched away from it as if it were a snake. "This is a temporary setback," Marcus said, his composure returning despite the gun trained on him. "You think you can threaten me? Do you have any idea of the resources at my disposal? The people who work for me." "You mean the people currently being arrested all across the city?" Michael asked with grim satisfaction. "The FBI has been busy this afternoon, Marcus. Very busy." As if on cue, the sound of vehicles screeching to a halt outside filled the air, followed by shouts and the pounding of feet. Seconds later, the house was swarming with FBI agents, weapons drawn, moving with practiced efficiency. Agent Harris burst through the door, taking in the scene with a quick, professional glance. "Everyone okay in here?" "We're fine," I confirmed, finally releasing the breath I'd been holding. "Thanks to my son, who was supposed to be safely at his hotel." I gave Michael a look that mixed gratitude with maternal reproach. "Change of plans," he said with a small, tight smile. "When Agent Chen called to check on us, I convinced her I could be more useful here. Turns out I was right." Marcus was being handcuffed, his rights read to him by an agent who seemed to take particular satisfaction in the task. Vanessa stood frozen by the window, watching the scene unfold with wide, disbelieving eyes. Agent Harris approached her. "Ms. Carlyle, you're also under arrest for conspiracy to commit money laundering, accessory after the fact in the murder of Richard Mitchell, and several other charges we'll detail at the station." "Wait," I said, surprising myself. She was coerced. She just said so herself. Vanessa stared at me, clearly shocked by my intervention. Agent Harris glanced between us. "That's for the courts to decide, ma'am. But we'll make note of your statement." As they led Vanessa away, she paused beside me. "Why would you speak up for me? After everything?" I considered the question. "Because I know what it's like to be controlled by manipulative men," I said finally. "And because whatever else you've done, you told the truth when it mattered most." She nodded, a flicker of something like respect crossing her face before the agents escorted her from the house. In the aftermath, as FBI teams processed the scene and took statements, Michael and I sat on the deck overlooking the ocean, both of us struggling to process the events of the day. "I still can't believe Dad was going to turn himself in," Michael said, shaking his head. "That's not the man I knew." "I don't think any of us really knew him," I replied. "Not the real Richard, beneath all the success and charm." "Maybe not," Michael agreed. "But at the end, it sounds like he was trying to do the right thing. That counts for something, doesn't it?" I thought about it, about Richard's final decision to confess, to protect his family even at the cost of his freedom and reputation. It didn't erase the betrayal, the lies, the years of deception. But it was something. A final act of redemption, perhaps. "Yes," I said softly. "It counts for something." The weeks that followed were a blur of legal proceedings, financial investigations, and media frenzy. The arrest of Marcus Dane and the unraveling of the Westlake money laundering operation made national headlines. Richard's name was dragged through the mud, his reputation destroyed posthumously as details of his criminal activities came to light. But strangely, I found I didn't care as much as I might have expected. The man the public now vilified wasn't the Richard the First had known, or thought I had known for 38 years. He was a stranger who had shared my home, my bed, my life, while keeping his true self carefully hidden. Vanessa's situation proved more complex. While she had been involved in the financial crimes, her testimony about being coerced by Marcus after Richard's murder, corroborated by evidence the FBI uncovered, led to reduced charges. She wouldn't escape prison entirely, but her sentence would be considerably lighter than Marcus's, who faced charges not only for financial crimes but for first-degree murder. As for the money, Richard's legitimate assets, the offshore accounts, the properties purchased through shell companies, much of it was frozen pending legal proceedings. Some would eventually be seized by the government, some released back to the estate to be divided according to Richard's will. The process would take years to fully resolve. But I found, somewhat to my surprise, that I no longer cared about the money either. What I had wanted wasn't really the fortune Richard had hidden away. It was justice, dignity, the acknowledgement that I deserved better than to be discarded after decades of marriage. And in an unexpected way, I had received that. 6 months after the dramatic arrests at the beach house, I sat in the courtroom for Marcus Dane's sentencing hearing. The judge, a stern-faced woman in her 60s, delivered a blistering condemnation of his crimes before sentencing him to life in prison without the possibility of parole for Richard's murder, plus additional decades for his financial crimes. As they led him away, Marcus caught my eye across the courtroom. I held his gaze steadily, refusing to look away, refusing to show fear or weakness. He was the one who lowered his eyes first. Outside the courthouse, reporters clustered on the steps, shouting questions as I emerged with Michael and Daniel at my side. For months, I had avoided the press, declining interviews, issuing only brief statements through my lawyer. But today felt different. Today, I was ready to speak. I approached the forest of microphones, and the shouting subsided as reporters realized I was actually going to address them. Mrs. Mitchell, how do you feel about the sentence? Are you satisfied with the outcome? What's next for you after all this? I waited for quiet, then spoke clearly, knowing my words would be broadcast across the country. Justice has been served today, not just for my late husband, but for all those who were victimized by Marcus Dane's criminal enterprise. Richard made many mistakes in his life, some unforgivable, but in his final days, he chose to do the right thing, and he paid for that choice with his life. I can't change the past, can't undo the damage his choices caused to our family, but I can honor his final act of courage by moving forward with the same integrity he ultimately found. A reporter called out, "What about Vanessa Carlisle? Do you forgive her role in all this?" I considered the question carefully. Forgiveness is a journey, not a destination. I'm still on that journey, as I suspect Ms. Carlisle is on hers. What I do know is that holding on to anger and resentment only perpetuates the damage. I've chosen to let go of those burdens and focus instead on rebuilding my life, not as Richard Mitchell's widow, but as Eleanor Mitchell on my own terms. And the money? Another reporter asked. Reports suggest you could still inherit millions once the legal proceedings conclude. Whatever financial resolution is reached, I've already decided to establish a foundation in Richard's name, focused on supporting victims of financial crimes and domestic abuse. Something good should come from all this pain and deception. As the questions continued, I felt a strange sense of peace wash over me. 6 months ago, I had been a shell of a woman, humiliated at my son's wedding, stripped of dignity, security, identity. Now I stood on these courthouse steps, cameras flashing, reporters hanging on my words, completely in control of my narrative and my future. Not because of Richard's money or Vanessa's downfall or even Marcus's punishment, but because I had found the strength to fight back, to stand up for myself, to reclaim what was rightfully mine, my sense of self-worth. 1 year to the day after Richard's death, I stood in the garden of my home, truly my home now, in ways it had never been during our marriage. I had renovated, redecorated, removed all traces of Richard's presence except for a single photograph in Michael's old room, kept for his sake rather than mine. The garden was in full bloom, roses climbing trellises, lavender scenting the air, bees humming among the flowers I had planted with my own hands. It was peaceful here, a sanctuary I had created for myself after the storms of the past year. Michael and Julia visited often, especially now with the baby on the way, my first grandchild, a new life untouched by the shadows of the past. We never spoke of Richard's crimes anymore, or of Vanessa, now serving her reduced sentence at a minimum security facility, or of Marcus Dane, who had already unsuccessfully appealed his conviction twice. Those chapters were closed. The future stretched before me, unmarked, full of possibilities I had never imagined for myself as a 60-year-old widow. The doorbell rang, interrupting my reverie. I wasn't expecting visitors, but I had learned to embrace the unexpected. When I opened the door, I found Rebecca Winters standing on my porch, looking nervous but determined. "Mrs. Mitchell," she greeted me. "I hope I'm not intruding. I want to check in, see how you're doing after everything." "Please call me Eleanor," I said, inviting her in. "And I'm doing well, thank you. Better than I could have imagined a year ago." We sat in the kitchen. My kitchen, redesigned to my taste, filled with light and warmth. Over tea, we talked about the past year, about the foundation I was establishing, about Rebecca's new job with a legitimate financial firm. "You know," she said as she prepared to leave, "when I first contacted you about Westlake, I was terrified. I thought I was putting myself at risk, possibly for nothing. I never imagined how it would all turn out." "Neither did I admitted. But I'm grateful you had the courage to come forward. It changed everything." After Rebecca left, I returned to the garden, to the peace I had found there among the flowers and bees and sunshine. As I deadhead roses, removing the spent blooms to make way for new growth, I thought about the strange journey that had brought me here. Richard's betrayal had nearly destroyed me. Vanessa's cruelty had humiliated me. Marcus's crimes had endangered me. Yet here I stood, stronger than I had ever been, more truly myself than at any point in my 60 years of life. There's an old saying that what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. I used to think it was just a platitude, something people say to make sense of suffering. Now I understood its truth. The pain, the loss, the fear, they had forged something new in me, something resilient and unbreakable. I had entered widowhood as Mrs. Richard Mitchell, a woman defined by her marriage, her husband's status, her role as wife and mother. I had emerged as Eleanor Mitchell, a woman defined by her own strength, her own choices, her own hard-won wisdom. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across my garden, I smiled to myself, thinking of Vanessa's words at my son's wedding, the words that had once cut me to the bone. "You're no longer part of this family." She had been right, in a way she never intended. I was no longer part of Richard's family, no longer living in his shadow, no longer bound by his lies and secrets. I was my own family now, and that was more than enough. When the first stars appeared in the darkening sky, I gathered my gardening tools and headed inside, closing the door on the day. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new joys, new opportunities to grow and change and live on my own terms. And for the first time in my life, I was ready to embrace them all, without fear, without reservation, without apology. Not as a widow, not as a victim, but as a woman who had walked through fire and emerged not just unscathed, but transformed. Eleanor Mitchell, finally completely myself.